Welcome to the entire plot of Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. This is a compilation of every single part that I have filmed explaining the entire plot of Heir of Fire. Just a warning, there is spoilers for Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight, but I do not spoil anything past the events of this book. If you'd rather watch this in the smaller broken down parts, you can definitely click down below. I will be linking all of the parts separately. I will also ask you for a little bit of patience. When I was first filming this book, I didn't have a full up setup yet, and I didn't really fully understand what I wanted the series to become. I promise that the quality of the videos as well as the sound quality does get better throughout the series. Now enjoy this entire compilation of the entire plot of Heir of Fire. Chapter 1, we start with Celaena just lounging on the rooftops in Wendelin. And we also find out she's been here for 2 weeks now. She basically got to Wendelin, looked at the castle, looked at all the guards and security, and she was like, you know what? Not my circus, not my monkeys. I'm not doing this job. And she doesn't really care about the consequences anymore because she is spiraling from Nehemia's death and everything that encompasses that grief. She's basically just living on the rooftops, and every single day she steals water, food, and lots of wine. The only thing she really cares about at this point is finding the word keys, because she did make a blood oath to Nehemia at the end of Crown of Midnight where she said, I will free the people of Eelway. And in order to do that, she needs to stop the king, and the only thing she can do to stop the king is beat him to the other word keys and destroy them. And conveniently for her, she's very close to Dornael, and the queen of Dornael is Mauve. And Mauve would know a lot about the word keys. We also get a little bit of insight as to how Celaena is handling her grief. Every single night when the sun goes down, she gets off of the rooftops and she basically goes to these like fighting pits. And at the very beginning of the night, she'll bet her amethyst ring that she got from Chaol, intentionally lose it, and then basically spend the rest of the night trying to win it back. And that's just like what she's been doing for the past 2 weeks. Chapter 2. So one of these nights, she's walking down an alley, probably looking for some food or water, and she sees a Fae male at the end of the alley walking in her direction. And she can tell off the bat this man is Fae. First of all, because just the way he carries himself, and second of all, he does have tattoos all over his body in the Fae language. And she says that she knew who he was and why he was there, but then she reveals that he's one of Mauve's elite warriors and doesn't really give us a name. So I don't think she knew like who he was, but she had enough of the idea. She knew that he was there to take her to Dornael. And he basically says like, you've been summoned, let's go. And he takes her to 2 horses, and they hop on these horses and they're heading there. And she's analyzing him in her own Sherlocky kind of way. She's figuring out a good bit about him, but the only thing that's really stumped her is she can't guess what his animal form is. Fun fact, and something that you will learn basically throughout the series, so I'll just give you a jump start right now and it will make things a lot less complicated for you. But every single Fae has an animal form. They're basically like shape-shifting, but they can only shape-shift into one animal. So we don't know what his is, and we actually find out his name is Rowan as well, so this is Rowan. I don't feel like this is ever really outright said. They just kind of assume you understand this, because we learn that Celaena's a Fae, right? We find out that Celaena's animal form is a human, which I know for a lot of people that was really confusing of like, why can she go back and forth between human and Fae, and most people can't do that. It's because human is her animal form, which to me is bonkers, but very convenient for her if you ask me. So yeah, she knows that hers is human, but she's like, what's this Rowan guy's animal form, you know? Chapter 3, we are gonna jump to Chaol's POV. It starts off with him letting us know that he's been having nightmares, basically reliving the night that he watched Aelin, aka Celaena, brutally murder Archer. But instead of Archer, he's like imagining Dorian in Archer's place. So I feel like this is just really reflecting Chaol's paranoia that Celaena and Dorian were always meant to be enemies, or Aelin and Dorian were always supposed to be enemies. And then later in the day, I guess he's with Dorian and he decides to tell him like, hey, so I have to go back to Aniel with my father. Now, 3 things. This is news to Dorian. Dorian's very upset about it. But there's 3 main reasons why Chaol has to go back to Aniel with his father. Obviously, it was the cost to get Celaena sent away so no one would find out she's Aelin. 2, he doesn't want to be around now that he knows Dorian has magic because he realizes he's a liability to Doran. And then 3, he doesn't want Dorian specifically to find out who Celaena is. So Dorian obviously knows that something is wrong and not quite right, but their conversation gets interrupted by the entrance of Aedion Ash River. So he comes into the dining hall, which I guess is where this conversation was taking place, and he is a character, to say the least. He is pure warrior, very clearly from Terrasen, and Kale kind of has this moment where he's looking at him and he's like, how did we not see it? Like, he's very clearly related to Celaena. They're the same exact person. Like, they have the same eyes, the same look about them. Like, they're so unbelievably similar. And somehow no one picked up on the fact that she could be Aelin, his cousin that went missing and everyone assumed was dead. Within seconds, Aedion gets real sassy with the king. He has some gall. And the running joke, I guess, is that the king keeps him around because it's like entertaining or refreshing to have someone to give him some pushback. But Kale has like this split second where he's like, first of all, why would he put someone in Terrasen, whose kingdom he demolished, so high up in ranking in their like army? And then on top of that, why does the king allow him to be so sassy with him? And then in that moment, Kale sees that Aedion has one of the black obsidian rings. So in other words, we find out that Aedion is being mind controlled by the king. Something else that's cool to note is that he's in possession of the sword of Orinth. And that is actually an important sword for you to know. So let's commit that to memory, all right? There's Damaris, that's the sword from Gavin's grave, and then there's the sword of Orinth, which is actually a royal Terrasen family heirloom. So technically it's supposed to be Aelin's. The king took it as a prize whenever he conquered Terrasen, and he basically gave it to Aedion as like a trophy for his loyalty, I guess, after he served him for so many years. And so Aedion reports to the king whatever he's supposed to, and then he decides to pop a squat right next to wherever Dorian and Kale are. And they hate him. They really, really do. To fill in the gaps for you, they call him Aderlin's whore. So I'll let you fill in the gaps for yourself on that one. Then Aedion starts asking them about the king's champion, saying he wants to meet her. Very fishy. Very suspicious. And Kale's like, well, thank goodness she's gone, because he would probably recognize her in a heartbeat, because he will actually learn a little bit more about this in a couple chapters. But basically, he would know her if he saw her. This could go one of two ways. One option is that he would identify her and then she would get killed basically on the spot. But then the other option is that he sides with her and then they become forces to be reckoned with, and then they decide to raise their own army and conquer Aderlin. Seems reasonable to me. And then Aedion starts talking about this witch queen, aka Baba Yellowlegs, who we know that Celaena killed. And basically he starts saying that, oh, it's very convenient, the timing of her death, almost as if she was actually murdered, which we know that she was. So that's a little awkward. And then Kale's like, yeah, that's so funny, LOL, I gotta go. And as he's leaving, Dorian's like, hey, I know you're hiding something from me. And Kale basically responds like, I am, but trust me, it's for the best. And that's it. Chapter 4, we have a brand new POV of a witch. Listen, the witch chapters in this book are really, really annoying, and they make no sense, and they feel like they serve no purpose, but I will challenge you to keep in mind how important these are for the future and just really, really pay close attention. And I swear, everyone I've talked to who've like read the books before and then they reread the books, they say like, I used to be so annoyed with the witch chapters, but then going back, like, I love them so much more now. Like, trust me, do not sleep on the witch chapters. Now, this witch's name is Manon Blackbeak. A lot of people say Manon. I say Manon. I feel like it's 50-50 split. Like, some people are like diehard Manons, some people are diehard Manons. So she's at a farm in a village and she's like raiding it basically. And her and all of her little witchling friends are just wrecking havoc and killing people left and right. In all reality, that is everything that happens in this chapter, but we do get a good bit of like witch politics, so bear with me. There's one faction particularly that we learn a lot about in this book, and then the other faction we learn about later. They're the Crochans or Crokins. I honestly, to this day, don't ask me to say that too many times. Those witches, these witches, they're further out in the series. Like, they'll be addressed here and there, but we're not going to learn a lot about them or their politics until a little bit later, so don't worry about that right now. But you do want to know about the Iron Teeth witches, and they all have iron teeth. So there's Blackbeaks, Blue Bloods, and Yellowlegs. If you ask me, 2 out of 3 of those are really epic, and one of them is a little bit silly. But that's just my opinion. I would not want to be a yellow leg witch. If I'm gonna be a witch, I better be a Blackbeak. Are you kidding me? Anyways, that's just my personal opinion. What I guess you do need to know is that all the Iron Teeth witches, they've basically made it their like mission and goal to like stomp out all the Crochin witches. So Manon is not just like your typical brutal witch. She's one of the most brutal witches in her faction, in the Blackbeaks. And she has a reputation for hunting down and killing Crochins, as is the assignment given to her by her grandmother. Back to the politics, every witch faction has like their grandmother who serves as like queen basically of their faction. They're called the matrons. But in this case, the Blackbeak matron is legit her grandmother, like by blood. And then another thing you're probably wondering right now is, oh, it sounds like all the witches are women. Yes, all the witches are women. There's no such thing as a male witch. There's no like wizards. Like you're a witch or you're a dude. Like there's no dude witches. And witches can only have female offspring. Fun fact. Chapter 5, really short one. Selena and Rowan have passed through Wendelin and now they're in Dornael. And they've set up camp for the night. And Rowan is just being really unpleasant. And he's not like being like mean, but he's just straight up rude. Like he's not talking to her, he's ignoring her. And then if he ever does answer her, it's very short, quick, curt. He's not really like taking care of her or anything. And this is starting to make Selena a little nervous that this isn't exactly the warm welcome to see Queen Mauve that she was hoping it was going to be. And now she's a little afraid of what this interaction is going to look like. Chapter 6. This is where one of my favorite plot lines of the whole series comes in, but we're going to start in Dorian's POV. Because everything has changed for him, knowing that he could literally die if anyone finds out he has magic, and the one person who knew he had magic and said she would help him with it died, and then he told his other friend who wanted to be there for him, and then she got sent away, and then he accidentally revealed to his best friend, and now his best friend isn't talking to him. So basically, he is in the most scariest situation of his life, and all the people he's ever cared about have now abandoned him. And he's basically been disappearing to the tombs like every single night just to get away, just get some peace. And that's actually really important. Remember that. Dorian likes to linger in the tunnels now. That's like his thing. So he's like walking around the tunnels one night and he's basically been told that it's his job to entertain Adian Ashriver while he's in court. And we don't like this assignment because we don't like Adian. He's specifically supposed to entertain him, no exceptions, today from noon till nightfall. So noon comes and Adian wants to walk through the gardens with Dorian. And Dorian just, yeah. There's like this really childish thing that goes down. I honestly, like, I can't even relay it without cringing, but basically they get in a little bro fight and Adian decides to like push him and make it seem or look like an accident, and then Dorian ends up like falling back into a thorn bush and like catching himself on his hand, and like the thorns cut up his hand. I don't know. It's really cringy. But all you gotta know is like Adian does not like Dorian, but Adian is gutsy about it, like legit. And now Dorian has like little cuts on his hand from rose thorns. Poor baby. Basically, nightfall happens, so he's like, see ya, Adian, I'm out of here. And he decides that the like thorn cuts from the roses are like kind of stinging his hand a little bit. So he's gonna go down to the infirmary and just get it healed. And he sees a healer, and she's one of the healers in the castle. She's not the head healer. She's in the hierarchy of healers, like she's towards the bottom, like she's basically learning under the head healer. And he asks her to heal the cut on his hand, and he's starting to realize it's a little embarrassing that he came for these tiny little cuts. And he's also realizing how beautiful this healer girl is. And then on top of that, he realizes like, oh wait, this was the healer who healed me, Selena, and Kale the night that we like tried to fight off that monster and we all had injuries. But she kind of picks up that he's buttering her up because he doesn't want her to tell anyone about that night. So she assures him like, don't worry, I haven't told anyone about like the night you guys came with all those like mysterious injuries. And then she introduces herself, and her name is Sorsha. Now we're gonna jump to Sorsha's POV because she's a little sad. She has healed him like a ton of times. So she was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm like invisible or something. Apparently every single time she's healed him, she's hoped that he would remember her And he never does. So the fact that he did like kind of remember her makes her feel better, but at the same time, I'm a nobody to you. And then we get a little bit more of her backstory. She works under Amethy. Amethy is the head healer. And she's actually an immigrant from a village called Fenharo that was actually burnt down and completely destroyed by the king because that's where I guess a lot of healers lived. And basically is reflecting on healing the prince and being like, I don't know what it is about whenever he walks through a door and forgets who I am, but I wonder when he's gonna come back here again and if he's gonna have me reintroduce myself and he's gonna forget who I am all over again. And it's kind of sad because you can tell it really hurts her because she really wants him to remember her, if you're picking up what I'm putting down. Chapter 7, back to Celaena's POV. Her and Rowan are finishing up their travels and they get to the gates of Dornael, which is the home of Mauve, aka, in case you don't remember, Mauve is Aelin's aunt. And Celaena walks into the room and Mauve pulls the whole, hello, Aelin Galathinius, which Celaena's like, that was like the words she was dreading because it was the first time like it's actually been said out loud. Chapter 8. Celaena's gut reaction is to say Aelin Galathinius is dead, which I mean, I get, like she hasn't been Aelin Galathinius in years, but she legit believes like that girl died in the river 10 years ago and nothing about her is the same as Aelin. On a side note, something that Celaena notices that I think is going to be really important to pay attention to is that there's actually an owl next to Mauve. And like, we see it. Have I been calling her Mauve again? I swear, I keep doing this. Mauve is a color. Maeve is the character. I'm so sorry. Her name is not Mauve. It is Maeve through and through. I keep doing this. Anytime I talk about her, I keep calling her Mauve, and that's really embarrassing at this point. But Maeve, okay? Maeve. Maeve always has an owl by her side. That's not super relevant right now, but it is gonna come up a couple times, so just like keep that mentally in the back burner. She does kind of have this passing thought, wondering if it's like an actual real owl or if it's a fae in their animal form, and their animal form is an owl. But then Maeve turns to Rowan, but she doesn't call him like Rowan. She calls him Prince Rowan. Honestly, I'm not gonna get too into this conversation because you can tell a lot of political baiting. Like Maeve is basically trying to get her to lash out or something. Like there's clearly some tension here. Like this isn't a sweet family reunion, but Celaena is determined to get answers about the word keys. So she's like holding her tongue, and you know my girl Celaena, that is not easy for her to do. Maeve, to put the icing on the cake of all the tension, she reveals that Celaena's mom, aka Maeve's sister, intentionally kept Aelin away from her. This is kind of where it occurs to Celaena. She's like, if my mother wanted to keep me away from you, it's likely for a very good reason. We're gonna wait to find out what that reason is, but Celaena's already like, you know what? I don't like where this is going. As Celaena's like contemplating all this, she starts feeling this burning, searing pain in her brain. Fun fact, Maeve can like rip into your mind. Like that's like her power, I guess. She can like read your mind, she can manipulate your mind, she can do a lot of different things. She can like pull information from your brain. So Celaena somehow, and this is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine in these kinds of books, she's just able to like, no training whatsoever, just like put a wall up and block all of that. Like keep her from reading her brain, even though she was not trained how to do that to her knowledge. To her knowledge though, so you never know, but still, that's weird to me. But I guess there's something to say about the fact that Maeve is actually really surprised that Celaena is able to resist her mind manipulation, so there's something. So she says, you know what, I think I will answer your questions about the word keys. Only thing is that I need you to earn it. I need you to work for it. And I think that the best way to do that is for you to embrace who you truly are, which is Aelin, Ashriver, Galathinius, and you need to learn how to shift and how to use your magic. And basically, you need to prove that you can be the queen that you were always meant to be. And then I will tell you the secret of the word keys. So she's supposed to go away for an undisclosed amount of time with Prince Rowan. Prince Rowan's gonna train her. And then once Rowan has decided that she's like good to go and she's ready, then he'll bring her back and Maeve will answer her questions. And this is especially risky because this isn't going to be like a 1 to 2 day thing. Like, this is going to take weeks and potentially even months. But honestly, this is her only shot, so she agrees. So her and Rowan go off to Mistward. Mistward is a fortress where a bunch of like half fae, half human go to basically try to learn to embrace their fae selves. But on their way there, Rowan basically reveals that not only does he hate Selena, he's not going to make this easy on her. Like, that is very clear off the bat. He is hundreds of years old. He is one of Mauv's best warriors. Maeve. He's one of Maeve's best warriors. And he thinks her status as a notorious assassin is pathetic. He's like, okay, you're like a meek little human assassin, so what? And she starts to like give him some attitude back, and he literally turns around and in full force, supernatural fae power slugs her right in the face. And she's baiting him on purpose and he knows it, so he's like, okay, fine, two can play this game. And they get like in a full-blown fight in which she is hysterically humbled. Because, honestly, compared to, like, a 500-year-old fae, like, she's nothing. And then, after they fight, and he humbles her, he says, you're on kitchen duties, see you tomorrow for training, and then he leaves. Chapter 9, Manon POV. So, post-scavenging of this village, her grandmother, or the Blackbeak matron, has summoned her to a place called Morath to guard her as she does some dealings with a duke. What duke do we know that just went to Morath? Parrington. So we also get a little bit of backstory here. Manon Blackbeak, she actually leads her own coven of witches called the 13, and as you guessed, there are 13 of them. And they're extremely well known, like this coven in the witch world basically, for being super brutal, super vicious, very precise, and warriors, because they've been fighting together for over 100 years. And they hunt down Crocians. Like, that's their thing. That's what they do. So we're officially at the meeting in Morath with the Duke, and there is a young woman and a young man currently with Duke Parrington. Something interesting off the bat, and I guess this is where you learn that witches do have like supernatural scent, kind of like how fae do, and she can smell that there's something severely off and not human about both Kaltain and Roland. So the Duke and the matron speak, and the matron comes back to Manon and she's like, gather your 13, we're all going to the mountains. Manon already doesn't like what this is looking like because she doesn't trust the Duke, she doesn't trust the scent on these humans, and then on top of that, her mother very clearly has some dealings with this Duke. She knows that all of them being summoned up north is gonna have something to do with this dude, but she cannot defy the matron. So they all summon up north, and it is revealed that Baba Yellowlegs has been murdered. And she was the matron of the Yellowlegs clan. To make things more interesting, the king of Aderlin is breeding wyverns. Not wyverns, wyverns. And he's going to give them to the witches in exchange for their brutal force in his conquest. Now listen, this is where things get kind of bonkers. Witches fly broomsticks in this story, but apparently, historically, hundreds of years ago, they used to ride wyverns, but wyverns, I think they went extinct or they became super rare. I don't know. I don't think they really go super into that or why, but basically wyverns have not been around and witches have not been able to ride wyvern. But the king has been breeding them and is offering them all their own wyverns if they fly in his battles as like his aerial army. Chapter 10, and this is in Kale's POV, and he is, you know, just like walking to check on his men because he's in charge of making sure that all the guards are where they need to be when they need to be there, and he realizes that 2 men are missing from their post. So when he goes to investigate, he finds out that Aiden Ashriver basically singled those 2 guys out and invited them to a party and basically forced them to go. Adian apparently rented out an entire tavern to throw this crazy epic party. Kale goes and he finds the 2 guards and basically, let's just say they regret ever leaving their post in the first place. And Kale's like, I'm gonna have a word with Adian about basically stealing my men away from their post. But get this, he cannot find Adian at Adian's own party. Almost as if he's not even there. Chapter 11, this is going to be in Selena's POV. She's getting the day started off in kitchen duty, and this is where we meet 2 of the kitchen workers, Emrys and Luca. And we love Emrys and Luca. She actually introduces herself as Alentia, and this makes me want to bawl my eyes out. If you do not remember, Alentia is the name that Nehemia gave to Celaena whenever her name was too heavy for her to carry. I feel like this also just kind of shows Celaena's helplessness, because something that I don't think I mentioned earlier is like when she's picking a fight with Rowan, you can very clearly tell she wanted to get beat up. Like, she has quite literally no hope for herself. She is kind of in self-destruct mode right now. So I try to keep it nice, bright, and bubbly. I'm doing my best. But I also want to make sure that you fully understand the weight of what she's going through. The fact that she's resorting back to the name Alentia, it really just reflects, first of all, how much she's grieving Nehemia. But then on top of that, like, she can't even bear to be identified as herself right now. Like, she does not want to be herself. And Rowan actually walked into the kitchens when this happened, and he doesn't correct her. So he's like letting her go along with this like secret identity thing. So she starts her job in the kitchens, and she actually really does like Emrys and Luca. Like, she does click with them very quickly. They're just very sweet people, and they're like half fae, half human, and they're there in hopes to embrace their fae side and be able to tap into their power and basically be accepted in culture as fae. But let's just say Celaena gets freaked out really fast when they start talking about how they've been there for literally years and they still have not tapped into their magic. So she's like, I don't have years. But also she learns that they're all terrified of Rowan and they feel bad for her that she's being trained by Rowan. So she does have a little bit of reassurance that she's being trained by the best. I think it's Emrys, not Luca, but Emrys actually does reveal that he has a mate. And this is the first time we're hearing about mates in this book. And mates is such a big deal in like every Sarah J Maas book. So if this is your first Sarah J Maas series or you're not familiar with the concept of mates, it's basically a bond that ties you closer even than marriage. So mates is quite literally like your soulmate. Like, you connect with one person, and they often like describe it as like having a string between the two of you that you can like tug on and that you can sense at all times, and that person is like your mate and you're bonded to them in every possible way. Chapter 12, we're gonna go back to Manon's POV. So they've all arrived to the Northern Fang Mountains. All the clans, not just the Blackbeaks, not the Crotians, but the Blackbeaks, the Yellowlegs, and the Blue Bloods. So they're all gathered there, and they were all given the same offer to fight for the king, and they would get their very own wyverns. So the whole place smells weird, like Kaltane and Roland did, and it's really throwing Manon off. Like, she can't put a finger on what it is, but something about it's really bothering her. We're just learning to exist in the North Fang Mountains, also surrounded by like rival clans. You'll learn very quickly, these three clans, they don't like each other. Like, they're not like the Crotians that they're like literally trying to make them extinct, but they rival each other. They're always trying to outdo each other. It's a very competitive environment, very catty, if you will. This is also where we meet Asterin, which is Manon's second in the 13 coven. And Asterin's a bit of a free spirit, to say the least. You will find in multiple situations she's getting whipped and punished for basically speaking out or doing things she shouldn't for the sake of protecting Manon or the other people in her coven. And this has been stereotypical of her for years. She's actually Manon's cousin, so Manon knows her very well. But we learn off the bat at the beginning of this chapter that Asterin recently has become more of a loose cannon than a free spirit, and it's actually starting to make Manon worried about having her as a second in her coven. Because the second is, as you can imagine, like the second most important person in the coven. So anyways, they're all there. All three clans are together, and they're basically paying homage to matron Baba Yellowlegs. It's basically a funeral. And this is where we get a little bit more witch politics. You know how I said Manon's grandmother is the matron of the Blackbeaks? So she is actually the heir to the Blackbeaks. So basically, if her grandmother dies, she would become the Blackbeak matron. So she's like next in line to be the queen of the Blackbeaks. Who are the heirs to the other ones, you may ask? That's a great question. Because like, yeah, you need to know that there's a Yellowlegs and a Blue Blood matron, but like, they're not as important as the heirs, because we are mostly, whenever we're in witch chapters, we're mostly going through Manon's point of view, and because she's the heir, we like work with the other heirs often. So Petra is the other Blue Blood heir. And then there's Iskra. We hate her. We don't like her at all. She's the Yellowlegs heir. So we have Manon, Iskra, and Petra. So Iskra has a bone to pick with Manon. In my opinion, when does she not? But particularly right now, apparently. Because apparently Asterin our lovely second and loose cannon got in a fight with some other yellow legs in the North Fang Mountains. And Iskra is especially like demanding penance for this, and it's so annoying because it's really just because all the matrons, all three of them, they all prefer Manon. Like, even over the heirs of their own clans, like, they all love Manon. Petra and Iskra, like, they will do anything to try to bring Manon down. So Manon decides to get away from all the drama, and she decides to go down to like where they're breeding all the wyverns and talk to some of the breeders. And basically learns that right now the wyverns are like fighting it out for dominance. And then once they've all kind of settled what their hierarchy is, then they're going to allow the witches to pick which ones they want. We also learn here that the weak ones are referred to as bait beasts, and they're going to be used to train the strong wyverns how to fight. That's kind of important. Remember that bait beasts, basically bottom of the totem pole in the wyvern world. This is also where Manon lays her eyes on Titus. Titus is the largest, most brutal, most intense of all of the wyverns, and it's in this moment that Manon decides, Titus is mine. I will get Titus. Nothing is gonna get in between me and having Titus as my mount. Chapter 13, Celaena's POV. She actually finds the kitchen job kind of therapeutic. And she's washing the dishes after breakfast one day when Rowan comes in and informs her that it's time for their first day of training. So he walks her out to a forest and basically just looks at her and he's like, okay, shift. Well, joke's on him because she never really learned how to do it as a child. She doesn't even know how. And he's like, no, you need to shift. And she's like, no, you don't understand. I can't shift and I won't shift and I don't like your tone. And basically it gets like this really sassy argument that they have. And he straight up like attacks her. And I guess he's trying to like bring out her fight, flight, and fright mode, hoping that it will force her to shift on instinct, because I guess for some people that works. But not for this girl, not for Celaena. That does nothing for her. And if anything, it just ticks her off more. And so he decides to take the verbal approach, and he decides to call her pathetic, spoiled, entitled, and then he calls her a coward. And if you remember Crown of Midnight, those were Nehemia's last words to Celaena, that she was a coward. And it's also become probably the heaviest trauma that she has carried from how things ended with Nehemia. And so this just makes her go ballistic. He doesn't really understand why, he doesn't know what happened, but he does realize that he crossed a line. Although he's not sure what that line is, he realized he crossed it. So he's like, okay, fine, I'll give you an out. So he walks her a couple miles to this really creepy cemetery. And I'll be totally honest, this scene is really hard for me when I read it to fully understand it. So it's a creepy magic cemetery that is guarded by giant iron doors that keep wights inside the cemetery. And for those of you who don't know, wights are basically like zombified magical beings. They're basically like fae zombies. Anyway, so he cuts her a deal, which we all know, and honestly, even Celaena, I'm pretty sure, is aware that it's a trap to make her realize, like, how weak she is. She can't say no to a bet, so she says, okay, bet, let's do it. But the deal is that if she can make it through the iron doors, walk through the creepy magical cemetery, and make it to the other side, he will tell Mauve that she's ready. And she knows he clearly would not put this in front of her if he thought she even had a chance of doing it. But she's got a point to prove, so she says yes. Chapter 14, it's dead of night, it's pitch black, and she decides she's gonna go for it. She's gonna make the walk through the creepy magical cemetery where there are zombified fae. So she starts to walk through, and all of the wights are looking at her, but none of them are pursuing her. And they're almost acting as if they're hesitant. And she's like, you know what? I don't really know what's going on here, but I'm gonna take advantage of it. So she's walking through as quickly as she possibly can. And then she realizes that they're all afraid of something. And it's not necessarily her. They're afraid of something behind her. She realizes that behind her there's a man that's not quite a man, but it's a thing. It's a person-ish, maybe. We don't really know. It's a being. So she decides to make a run for it, but then she starts having hallucinations of every traumatic thing she's ever experienced. And she's quite literally reliving it. So she's reliving her parents' murder,
her kingdom being conquered, the brutal assassination of her best friend, everything she endured at the end of your slave camp. Like, she's quite literally reliving it all as if it's happening to her again. So she starts throwing up, literally pees herself, and then has like nothing short of the world's biggest panic attack, which no one's judging you for that. This honestly sounds horrifying. And then she realizes that the thing is behind her as it goes to like grab her from behind. So she snaps out of these extremely realistic and horrifying hallucinations and does some like crafty self-defense stuff. She somehow gets out of his grasp and she starts like sprinting towards Rowan. Somehow her survival instincts kick in and she actually gets to Rowan on the other side. So she did it, I guess. Anyways, so this is what the book says. She was screaming or sobbing or not making any sound at all. Then she felt a shift and a surge, a well opening beneath her stomach and filling with burning, relentless fire. Agony cleaved her in a pulse, her vision jumping between crystal clarity and the muted eyesight of mortals, her teeth aching as the fangs punched out and retracted, ebb and flow, mortal, immortal, mortal, immortal, shifting as fast as a hummingbird's flapping wings. With each shift, this well deepened. That's important to know. Well, there's a well, it's deepening. Remember that. That wildfire rising and falling and reaching up, up, up. She really did scream then because her throat burned, or maybe that was just the magic coming out as she unleashed it. And then she literally passes out. So not only did Homegirl finally shift, but she literally shifted back and forth between her fae form and her human form like 100 different times. Basically, her magic is like losing control and doing a bunch of crazy junk. And there's a bunch of allusions to fire there. So this is also where you are supposed to pick up the fact that her power is wildfire. So she wakes up hours later at Rowan's feet, where he informs her that she had a magical tantrum. Listen, she just went through probably the most traumatic thing of her life, and you just told her she had a tantrum. Sir. And then he says that the thing that like chased her and gave her hallucinations should not have been there, and that there's actually been skinwalkers in the area. We'll learn a little bit more about what those are, and they are as horrifying as they sound, but he had no clue what that thing was that attacked her. So he tries to interrogate her about what happened, but she's like, you know what, I'm not going to talk to you because you just told me I had a magical tantrum, and she doesn't want to relive all that. So he decides to escort her back to Mistward and call it a night. Chapter 15, Cale's point of view. He's in his bedrooms, and his father just like made his way in there somehow, I guess, and is just like harassing him, which like I get why he's upset, but at the same time, we don't like Daddy Westfall. We never do like him. There's never a reason to like him. So anything he does is just extremely annoying. Like, he breathes and he's annoying. But realistically, he found out that Cale hasn't even told the king yet that he's leaving, and he doesn't have a replacement yet. You name it, like, he hasn't done it. So his dad's like, are you an oath breaker? Are you breaking your oath? He's also upset that he hasn't even begun packing his things, because he's in his room and he's like, oh, all your stuff is still nice and moved in. So when were you planning on moving back home like you promised? Cale's excuse is that he hasn't found a worthy replacement yet, but is definitely just an excuse because he hasn't really left because of Adian. Something is really messing with his head when it comes to Adian. Also, with what Aelin told him about the word keys, he really wants to make sure that he does everything he can before he leaves. And then the third thing is that this rebel group that Archer and Nehemia were leading, we don't really know what's come of it. Just because the two people who were leading it died doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't exist anymore. On top of that, Nehemia wanted to destroy the word keys, whereas Archer wanted to use them. So clearly, even within this rebel movement, it's kind of like we don't really know what's going to become of it, because even the two leaders disagreed on what their objective was. Also, I legitimately could not tell you why this happens or why he knows this, but for some reason, and I'm really racking my brain right now and I cannot remember for the life of me, but Cale somehow hears a rumor that the rebels, intentions unknown, but these rebels have found a way to release magic. Not only does he need to figure out how in the world they plan to do that, but he also really wants to know because he wants to know what the outcome would be for Dorian if magic was released. So he tells his dad, yeah, give me 3 months. I'll be there in 3 months, which if you ask me, like, any one of those tasks could not be accomplished in 3 months. So the fact that he thinks he's going to accomplish all 3 in 3 months is kind of hysterical. And then what's even crazier is that his dad somehow talks him down to 2 months. he'll give him 2 months and Kale owes him a favor, which if you ask me, that's a really dumb bargain, so I don't know why Kale accepts it. Sorsha's POV. She, the healer, remember the cute little healer, right? She's called to Dorian's rooms by name, and supposedly he has some cuts on his hand and his lip from like sparring, and then he starts like asking her about herself, and this is like not standard. This is not normal. Usually they come in, they service them whatever they need, and then they leave. So he's asking her where she's from, and she's actually very hesitant to say because Fenharrow is one of those cities that's like very controversial topic politically, because quite literally almost everyone there was killed because most of the people who had magic, I guess, were like collectively in Fenharrow. So when magic was banned and people were getting killed for it, the people in Fenharrow took a really hard hit. But it's a small village, or it was a small village in the south, but it just no longer exists because it was completely just demolished. This is also where we find out that she's had a crush on him for years. Like, this is an internal thing, and I think we like definitely picked up on this earlier, but it's definitely confirmed right here. He starts asking her more questions about her family, like if they survived the attacks on Fenharrow, and she says no, and things get awkward and weird, so she ends up just like leaving when she's done healing him. And then I love this part. The following day, she didn't expect the messenger who arrived after breakfast asking for the name of her village in Fenharrow. And when she hesitated, he said that the crown prince wanted to know. He wanted to know so he could have it added to his personal map of the continent. Chapter 16, Manon's point of view. Tension is at an all-time high with the witches right now because they want to settle who has what wyverns, because they're being bred and they're being trained, and all of the witches are now kind of like stalking them out, and they've already like low-key mentally claimed them, but they haven't actually. There's gonna be like a claiming ritual and everything. They're all like super on edge about who's gonna get what wyverns. In case you missed it, the witches in the Throne of Glass world, they drink human blood. They're basically like vampire witch hybrids. Honestly, sometimes I think Throne of Glass witches are more like vampires than actual witches, but it's just like a funny little tidbit because there's a lot of the king's men and like guards who are all in the Northfang Mountains. They're all like terrified of them, and there's like strict rules by the king, and they're not allowed to drink the blood of any of the king's men, which if you ask me, buzzkill, but hey, like I get it. So anyways, it's flying time, and the witches are going to be riding wyverns for the first time in over 100 years, and it's a very exciting and crazy thing, but it's not like their wyverns, so they haven't claimed them yet. This isn't like the claiming ritual. They're like training wyverns. They're basically the ones that are super duper trained. They're not training to fight in battle, so they're not going to be trying to like fight it out with each other. They're going to be very complacent and very workable for the witches to like practice flying and practice formations and stuff like that. For their flying training today, the 13 have to go over something called the drop. And I will tell you right now, I'm on my like 3rd or 4th time rereading these books, and only now has the drop actually made sense to me. I don't know what I was imagining in my head before, but apparently it's like a cave mouth, but it's horizontal to the ground. So they're like flying over a giant hole in the mountain. Okay, yeah, maybe it still doesn't really make sense to me. But anyways, there's this giant gap, right? A drop, if you will, that they're gonna be flying over. And of course, Manon and her coven. Why do I keep calling her Manon? I've always been a hardcore Manon person, but I keep calling her Manon. I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm not like anti any sort of pronunciation. I just think it's very weird because I've always been a big Manon chick. Manon and her 13 fly over the drop. They absolutely crush it. They were the first ones to do it. They're setting the example. The matrons are happy. Everyone's happy. Except for Iskra and Petra, who continue to feel threatened by Manon and her success. So later that day, Manon's grandmother, aka the Blackbeak matron, summons her, tells her she's proud of her. Mind you, this is a really intense woman. So for her to be like, I'm so proud of you, like that's rare, that's weird, that's suspicious. And then tells her that she and her coven are being promoted to wing leader, which is basically they're going to be leading the Blackbeaks in battle. and basically said there's gonna be an Iron Teeth queen and she wants it to be Manon. I think that's very interesting because based off what we know about the matron, I would assume that she would want to be the one sitting on the throne and being the queen in the end. But she says like she wants it to be Manon. Like she wants Manon to be the queen of all the Iron Teeth witches once this is all said and done. Chapter 17, Celaena's POV. If Celaena did not already feel horrible enough, she wakes up feeling even more horrible. She basically goes down to her kitchen duties the next morning, and when she walks into the kitchen, Luca and Emerys are like horrified because she looks like she's been through it, frankly. Then later that day, Prince Rowan comes and picks her up for their training, and he has one command and one command only. He tells her, okay, shift, and as always, she refuses to do it. And at this point, I really do think it's not even her refusing. Like, she legit just doesn't know how to do it, but her pride won't let her admit that she can't, so she's just pretending like it's a choice. She does actually, like, later in the day, give it a couple tries, but, like, nothing's happening. After training, she goes back to the kitchen. She tries to shovel down, like, as much food as possible. And it's, like, much later in the day. Like, they literally, I can't even imagine, like, from breakfast to late in the evening, like we're talking an 18+ hour day where Rowan is just staring at her being like, shift. Like, I would actually lose my mind, but she did not shift all of that, and she literally, I guess they just stood there in the woods. But she gets to the kitchen, and Emerys and Luca and a couple other people, they're like telling stories about the Fae, and kind of like, think like campfire stories, but about their heritage and about their mythology. And she basically just hides in the back and she eats as much as she can, and she just like soaks in all of these stories. And then she looks out a window and she sees a hawk, and she realizes that she has seen that specific hawk a couple times, including when she was rotting away on the rooftops in Wendelin. So it has occurred to her that Rowan's animal form is this hawk that he has been turning into and he's been watching her from. And also he is in his hawk form listening to these campfire stories. Chapter 18 is a long one, and it's got 3 different POVs. So let's start strong with Dorian's POV. Dorian is basically making it like his daily mission to find an excuse to go down to the infirmary to see Sorcha, and I am here for it. I think it's adorable. And it's one of those things where like he knows that she likes him, and she's kind of picking up that he likes her, but at the same time, I don't know if you guys remember, but back in the Throne of Glass book, he had a reputation for basically being a heartbreaker and like making his way around the court. She thinks he might still be that way, and she's like, I don't know if you actually like me, or if you're just kind of bored. But she's actually getting to this point now where she's like, oh, he might actually like me. So oddly enough, one day where he's down there in the infirmary, she starts asking him about Celaena. Basically, she's like, hey, like, I still haven't told anyone about that one night, and I don't plan to, but I'm just like curious, like, what is going on? Like, are you guys okay? Like, what? Like, I rightly so. As a residential nosy person, I'm surprised it took her this long to ask, so I think it's just totally reasonable. But she asks, and he decides that he trusts her, and he actually tells her like everything that he witnessed that night, like everything that led up to them coming down to the infirmary. As he's talking about this, he's getting very emotional, he's getting really riled up. And what did we learn from the book Crown of Midnight? Dorian, who has no idea what his magic is or how to control it, he accidentally releases usually very chaotic forms of magic when his emotions are heightened. So he's talking about this, he's getting really anxious, and then all of a sudden his magic just like erupts everywhere. We're gonna jump to Sorcha's POV because Dorian just like exploded magic. She's such a queen. Like, it was in this moment that I knew I loved her. She literally turns to him and she's like, I'm not gonna tell anyone. And then she like turns over a table that had a bunch of stuff on it and everything spills, and it causes this huge commotion. And Mithy, remember, she's the like head healer of the castle, she like bursts into the room, and Sorcha takes the full blame. She was like, oh my word, I'm so klutzy, like I knocked over the table, because like his burst of magic, like it knocked a bunch of stuff over and it also like made some noise. So she like tipped the table so that when Amity came in, it would like seem like that's definitely what happened, is that the table they were next to like fell over, and that's why everything's exploded and all over the place. Honestly, just like genius on the spot thinking on Sorcia's end. And there's basically like, there's herbs and medicines and potions and like everything is just everywhere. And I think the funniest part is that Amity is literally just like most concerned that Prince Dorian witnessed this, because she thinks this is just Sorcia being super incompetent, and so she scolds Sorcia for being so careless, let alone in front of the prince, and she's apologizing to the prince over and over and over again. I'm so sorry for Sorcia being so unprofessional. It's like this whole thing. She basically asked Dorian to leave, and she's like, we'll clean this up right away. I'm so sorry. If you ever need anything, like, we'll come to your rooms. Like, there's no reason why you should feel the need to have to come down here. And you know, she's catering to the prince as like her job. And basically she's like, Sorcia, you need to clean this up. And then Amity leaves. So as Sorcia's cleaning everything up, she is like, the prince has magic. Like, it's occurred to her, like in the moment, obviously, like she knew something had happened, but she hadn't really processed it. And then he leaves and she's like, his eyes glowed, magic erupted, it came from Prince Dorian. So she knows like his most dangerous secret. Chaol's POV. He decided to go to one of Adian's parties tonight, and he pretends to get like crazy drunk, and he's just enjoying time with some of his guards that are off duty that night. And he pays close attention to Adian, and he notices when Adian sneaks out, and so Chaol decides to follow him. Turns out Adian was meeting someone, and he had his hood up. Adian and the hooded figure go into this building, and Chaol is like walking up to like try to go scout out the situation, because he realizes that this is the building that Selena told him that the rebels were meeting up at. In pure Chaol fashion, I'm honestly so surprised he's captain of the guard considering how many times this has happened, but someone sneaks up on him and attacks him. Gives him the good old chloroform treatment. Like, the amount of times that Chaol gets snuck up on in the series is honestly so comedic. Chapter 19, Chaol's POV, because if you remember, last time we saw Chaol, he was being chloroformed and kidnapped once again. So he's dragged into the building that Adian went to, which, as we know, Selena once told him that she was pretty sure that's where the rebels were like doing their meetings. Sure enough, he has his thing taken from off of him, and he's like, yep, okay, these are the rebels and this is Adian. He's like, you know what? If I'm going down, I'm going down swinging. So he's like, you may think that Adian's a part of your movement, but if you notice the obsidian ring, that's how the king mind controls people. So Adian's most likely a traitor. Okay, calm down. Like, way to throw someone else under the bus. But Adian actually reveals, and this is what's crazy, he noticed something was off about the ring. So he had a replica made, and the one that he was given by the king is like long gone. Like, he threw it into the ocean. The one he's wearing is a fake. So Adian is in fact not mind controlled by the king. And they start openly talking in front of Chaol, and this is where Chaol realizes he's dead. Because if you think about it, like, he knows way too much for them to let him walk out of there alive. So he decides to take the biggest gamble, which is so annoying because it's not even a gamble with his own life, it's a gamble with a lot of other people's lives. But he just looks at them and he says, Aelin is alive. So we're gonna jump to Adian's POV. Now we get some more backstory about Adian that makes him seem more like a human being. He had all but sworn his life to Aelin, and that's actually a very big thing that we'll get into soon. He was basically her sword. Like, that basically just means like he's her #1 protector. But basically the day that Adarlan invaded, he was separated from Aelin, and he to this day has like never forgiven himself for not being by her side on that day. He basically has held himself responsible for her death. That's also why we find out he serves the king. Like, it's a way to punish himself. Everyone grieves differently, but this to me has always been like, really? You're gonna punish yourself by helping? Okay. But in all reality, it's never even occurred to him that she might be alive. Like, he has always told himself that Aelin is dead. So he wants to know more, but Chaol is of course saying that he'll only speak to Aiden, which in my opinion, thank goodness Chaol does at least something right, and he's not gonna tell a whole bunch of strangers what he knows. They go off to the side, and Chaol tells Adian everything about how she was found in a river, how she was found by Arobin Hamel, how she became one of the most notorious assassins, how she went to the end of year salt mine camps, how she was chosen to compete in the competition from book 1, and then how she won, and how she's the king's champion, and all of it. But then he gets to the part where he found out who she was and had her sent away to Wendelin. Now, I don't know what Chaol was expecting, if he was expecting unending gratitude from Aedion, but Aedion is fuming. He is furious because a couple things. One, he's like, how could you be so dumb? Like, you did not know my allegiances. Like, you basically threw Aelin under the bus to save your butt in case you died. Also, what if Aedion was working for the king? Like, he just took his word about the ring, but like, what if he was? And then because Aedion was Aelin's sworn protector, and we learned in the past part that Aelin's mother at all costs kept her away from her sister Maeve, Aedion knows why she was kept from Maeve, and he's like, you do realize you sent her to Maeve. Of all the people, you can send her away anywhere, but to Wendelin, like, that's the place you chose to send her? Obviously, Chaol doesn't fully understand what he's done. He doesn't understand Fae politics. He's like, oh shoot, was that not the right thing to do? As much as Aedion and Chaol hate each other, and probably hate each other more now because of this interaction, they realize that the only way that they can keep everything from falling apart is if they work together. Chapter 20, we're going to be in Celaena's point of view. Basically, we find out that, much like where we left her off, every day after training, she is going to the kitchens, she's shoveling down as much food as possible, she's sitting in the back of the kitchens, and she listens to Emerys tell Fae stories. And this part never truly made sense to me, and it kind of does break my heart, because Emerys and Luca have always been so kind to Celaena, like, since she showed up, but she starts to put her walls up again. It might be the insecurity that she's struggling to shift. I'm not really sure what it is. She's not being as nice to them as she used to, which honestly, shame on her, but I also kind of understand. Flash forward to a day of training where Rowan asks her to shift. So Celaena says, okay, I'll shift, but I want to see you shift first. So he shifts into his majestic hawk form, and then he shifts back to Fae. And she's like, no, I'm still not shifting. And then they get into like a verbal spar again, because when are these guys not bickering realistically? But then he literally leans forward and bites her neck with his canines. First of all, ow. Second of all, she shifts because of it. Chapter 21, Prince Rowan is pretty proud of himself for making her shift, but she's obviously like ticked off because he just bit her. And this is where we get into the next big dilemma after Aelin learning how to shift on demand, is that she shifts and she immediately wants to shift back to her human form because that's her comfort zone. This is where she's been for the past, what, 10 plus years of her life. But instead she just like decides to stay Fae and like soak in all the Faeness, because like all of her senses are heightened, her body proportions are different, like everything about her feels different. But then things get kind of crazy because her power, which is fire, just starts going berserk. Thankfully though, and conveniently enough, Rowan's power is air, and so he's able to like engulf her flames and like blow them out. And then this part gets weird, and like these things, they're fine to read, but when you have to explain them out loud to someone else, it sounds really weird, so bear with me here. But he apologizes for biting her because apparently when he bit her, he could sense that she was already in a different committed relationship with Chaol, and we both technically know that they're not really in a relationship. And then he also mentions how Fae are super territorial, and it's like super inappropriate and against Fae culture to like bite someone who is in a relationship with another person. Guys, it's like I said, it's very cringy, it's very weird, and it's uncomfy, and it's only fine if you don't think about it too much. So let's just stop talking about it. Anyway, so they go back to training, and his only assignment for her for the rest of the day is just to shift back and forth between her Fae and her human form. I don't remember off the top of my head because I didn't write it down in my outline, but I'll be really honest with you. Rowan and Aelin fight so much and bicker so much that I stopped writing what they were bickering and fighting about, because I can guarantee you 9 out of 10 it doesn't actually matter to the plot. But basically what comes out as a result of it is important. Basically Rowan, we find out, hates her because she is Aelin and she decided to become the most notorious assassin and just enjoy. He thinks she enjoyed it because she's kind of playing this role that she has no shame in what she did. His thing is that her people were defeated and they needed a leader then more than ever. And she decided to just run away, keep a secret identity, and just live a life as a notorious assassin. And then on top of that, she decided to serve the king, who is her enemy, and kill for him, even though we find out that she didn't actually kill for him. But his point is that she even entertained the idea of serving him in the first place. And he's basically saying that you have people who are in hiding, waiting for a leader to rise, and you've been here this whole time just playing assassin. And I do see where he is coming from. Like, she did have a responsibility that she ran away from, but then at the same time, she was like 10 years old, so it's hard to be mad at her, but he feels totally justified in hating her for not deciding to take up the throne at 10 years old. So Rowan's big issue here is why? Why all of a sudden are you now interested in finding these word keys and defeating the king, and you're not even talking about taking up your throne? If anything, you seem very adamant against taking up your throne. And this is where she reveals that she's not doing this to take back her throne, but to free the people of Eelway, because her friend Nehemia died and she was the princess of Eelway and she promised her that she would help free her people. Rowan doesn't see why that's her problem or even her priority at the time, but Aelin then shares, and I feel like this so perfectly encapsulates everything Aelin is struggling with right now. She basically says that when my people suffered, I ran away. Nehemia died for her people when they were suffering. So basically, she's realizing Nehemia is the princess she wishes she was. She gets very emotional. She doesn't want Rowan to see that he got to her emotionally. And so she decides that she's leaving, but not to go back to Mistward. Like, she's just leaving Mistward. She's no longer doing the thing with Mauve. And in my opinion, this doesn't necessarily fully make sense, because she literally just gave her reason for wanting to find the word keys, and now she's throwing away that. But don't worry, there's a next chapter. Chapter 22. So Aelin sets up camp, she makes some makeshift weapons, and then on top of that she starts a fire. Later in the night she realizes the forest is really quiet, maybe too quiet, and then it occurs to her every single time that her and Rowan have set up camp, even from when he picked her up at the very beginning of this book in Wendelin, he has always told her not to start a fire or set a fire, despite the fact that she's always asked for it because she hates being cold. Same. So she realizes, oh, there might actually be a really good reason for that. So she starts to stump on the fire, but it is much too late because she can hear shrieking in the distance. Then lightning strikes in the distance, and she can see the outlines of long, lanky bodies. And she realizes that these are the skinwalkers that Rowan told her about. Skinwalkers are made up of sewn together human skin of their victims. So they like to hunt down beings, skin them, and then as a trophy, sew the skin to their body. So they smell like death and decay, and they probably look like everything from your worst nightmare. And I think I could show a picture of them, but I don't want to give you nightmares because I looked up fan art of skinwalkers from Throne of Glass and I was horrified. So if you're really curious, you really want a visual, you really want to know, you can look up skinwalkers, but this is going to stay blank. We're not going to be showing skinwalkers here. So she realizes that unless she starts running, her skin is going to be decorating these skinwalkers. So she decides to start booking it. And as she's running through the forest, Rowan grabs her and he's like, you're not going to make it in your human form. You need to shift right now or we're both going to die. So she shifts back into her fae form with a little bit of trouble, but she does it. And right after she shifts, Rowan basically informs her, hey, just a heads up, these people cannot be killed with mortal weapons. So our best bet is to outrun them. And something about crossing a river. I guess they can't go into the water. I don't know. So they run all the way and it's super high intensity, very dramatic, very creepy, but the skinwalkers are chasing them all the way there. But they do get to the river, they cross to the other side, and then Aelin decides now is a good time to experiment with her fire, because although the skinwalkers can't be killed with a mortal weapon, technically because she's like an immortal creature, her power is immortal. So she's like, what if they could be killed with an immortal fire? So she releases like a blue wildfire at them and they disintegrate. They no longer exist. They are as dead can be. Because Homegirl just about started a forest fire. Thankfully, Rowan has very strong magic and he's able to like use his wind to put out the fire so that the forest was not harmed. And now this is where we're going to learn a little bit more about the magic system. I'm not going to pretend to have a full understanding of it, and in my opinion, I don't even think the Fae have a full understanding of it except for this like well analogy. Actually, let's go with the battery analogy here. They talk about wells, but honestly, battery helps. So if they rest, they can charge their battery to like 100%, but whenever they use their magic, they use up that battery. And now the part that I think really confuses people is that you'll often hear like they're reaching down to the bottom of their well. So think like small spurts of power can come from like the juice at the top of the battery. But if they're going to like be releasing a huge chunk of magic, the best way to do that is if they reach with their magic all the way to the bottom and they pull from the bottom. That is how I have visualized it, and that is what helps me truly understand the magic system. I hope that helps. If it doesn't, I'm sorry. That's the best I can do for you. Oh, also, you can die if you get your battery to 0%. I guess that's important. So because she hasn't used her magic like really ever, her battery does get spent pretty quickly and pretty easily. So she just released like wildfire, so that used a good bit of her battery, so she needs to rest now. So she shifts back into her human form, and Rowan comes up to her and he's like, hey, so how come it was so easy for you to shift? And she gives him like a, oh, I don't really know, like whatever answer. But in reality, what we find out, Selena, when it came to shifting for herself, noticed she ran away from them for a bit in her human form. But once Rowan was involved and Rowan wasn't going to leave her behind and she realized they were both going to die if she didn't shift, then it was easy for her to shift. So it's pretty much the concept of if it's going to endanger someone else, she can't let someone else be endangered by her incompetence, so then she's going to be able to shift. But she's not able to just shift for herself. Chapter 23, this is going to be in Manon's point of view, and today is the day. Today is selection day. Everyone's going to have like their own mount by the end of today. As we've talked before in part 1, she really wants Titus. She's already very possessive of him, but he's also the biggest, the baddest, and most brutal. So as you can imagine, a lot of other witches want Titus. And Manon's insane in all the best ways because she literally sharpens her talons because she said, I'm ready to throw hands, or in this case, throw claws if I need to get Titus. Because that's pretty much what it's going to come down to, is it's technically first come, first serve, but if multiple people want the same wyvern, they pretty much have to fight it out. They don't really go into very much what that looks like, but it's decided somehow. So all the wyverns are basically going into this pit, and all the witches are outside and on top, so the pit's like in the ground, and they're all standing in a ring like above this pit, watching as these wyverns are fighting bait beasts. Remember, those are the ones I told you that they're not really strong enough to be in battle, and they're also usually smaller as well. They're putting these little bait beasts in the pit, and then the ones that are actually up for auction or selection are being thrown in there, and they're basically brutalizing and torturing these little bait beasts. It's horrible. Just to like show off their skill to the witches and the witches to claim them. So it's Titus's turn and he gets a bait beast. And this is like a bigger bait beast, but Titus is a bigger wyvern, so it makes sense. So Petra actually doesn't want Titus. She wanted a different wyvern and she already got him. But Iskra wants Titus. So as Titus is out and he's showing off and he's like messing with the bait beast, Iskra's like, if you want him, Manon, you should go get him. And she pushes her into the pit. So now Manon is in a pit with Titus and this bait beast. It was in this moment she realizes Titus is gonna kill her. Like, she's looking at Titus being like, I claim you, you're mine. Like, she goes into this confident because her and Titus are practically soulmates, right? But Titus is not having it. He just sees her as like a meal. And this is where Manon's like, do I really want to go into battle with a beast that doesn't respect me? I don't know. It's kind of this whole like epiphany moment that she has, I guess. And so she decides like, if I want to get out of this alive, I need to fight my way out. So she's trying to get her way out of the pit. Titus is coming after her. And then she realizes that this bait beast has a lot more gall than some of the other bait beasts did. And this bait beast is actually fighting back. So she decides that her and this little bait beast are going to team up and fight Titus. As she's trying to fend for herself, the bait beast comes up and like rips Titus's throat out, using Manon as like a distraction to Titus. It's like this whole thing. But basically this tiny little bait beast killed Titus, like the wyvern that everyone wanted. So Manon looks at this little guy and he looks her right in the eyes, and she realizes that like she has a connection with this wyvern that she cannot explain, and against her better judgment, she claims the bait beast as her mount. So flash forward, Iskra is whipped and punished, obviously, for shoving Manon into the pit. But Manon's also in trouble too, because her grandmother matron's like, you ruined my plans. Like, I wanted you to be the wing leader. I wanted you to come out of this battle victorious. And then when we crowned a witch queen, I wanted it to be you. And you've ruined that all by picking a tiny little bait beast who can't even fly. So that's a fun fact. This thing cannot even fly yet. And it's in this moment where Manon's like, absolutely not. I'm gonna stick to my gut. I know that he can be the best wyvern out there for me, and I'm gonna train him. I'm gonna get him airborne, and we are going to be wing leader, and I'm gonna end up on the Iron Teeth throne by the end of this war. So how she's gonna do that, we're gonna find out. Hi, so it's actually an entirely different day. I needed to take a couple day break from the Throne of Glass series, and I actually ended up taking like a 1 week break from YouTube, but I'm back and I'm ready to go and I feel rejuvenated, and let's just kick off with chapter 24. I love you. I love you so much. Thank you. Alright, so chapter 24. This is Kale's POV. He takes Adian to Selena's old rooms and they go down to the tombs together. He also shows Adian the Eye of Elena necklace and basically explains what it does, which we know it protects you from danger. Now, do you remember when I told you, I think back in part 1, that Dorian's new coping mechanism for all of his trauma is to just like explore and walk around the tombs at night? Well, he's down in the tombs and apparently he's been eavesdropping on this entire conversation. This is a big deal because if you think about it, Dorian knows nothing. And not only is he finding out that Selena has magic, but Selena is also Aelin Galathynius, is like sworn to be his biggest enemy. And then on top of that, Kale knows about magic that exists, which his father is in control of. It's like this whole thing because Dorian makes a noise or something and Adian and Kale realize he's there, and they basically are like, are you gonna tell anyone? Because this is a big deal, because Dorian could very well go back to his dad and tell his dad everything. And they're kind of in this situation where it's like, shoot, like what do we do? Thankfully, Dorian is not interested in telling his dad anything. He also kind of had like suspicions that his dad was just not a stand-up guy, but he's very, very, very upset at Kale, which honestly, totally justified. Like, I get Kale keeping it a secret from him, but I feel like it's gone too far without Dorian having a thorough understanding of what's going on. He should have heard about this a lot sooner than just now. But I will say something that I will give Kale bonus points for here is that Dorian basically asks Kale if he told Adian about him, aka his magic, and he finds out that he did not tell Adian. So Kale has not been honest with him, but he hasn't told anyone his secret, which is another thing where it's like, okay, bare minimum, but it's still appreciated. However, Dorian asking Kale if he told Adian that he had magic was not subtle enough, and Adian's like, if you're trying to ask him if he told me you had magic, no, he didn't, but I kind of figured it out on my own. But then the bigger question, probably even then, if Dorian is gonna keep all this secret, which we learn that he is, the big question is Dorian gonna get involved? And Dorian beats them to the punch and he says, don't even think about it. Now we're gonna jump to Adian's POV. Later that day, he's meeting with Ren and Murtaugh and basically confirms with them that they can trust Kale. That's kind of crazy to me because Adian's been very not trusting, especially with Kale. So like, this is a big deal that he's like saying not only that he can trust him, but that they can trust him too. Ren and Murtaugh want to know where Aelin is because Adian hasn't told them yet that he knows that she's in Wendelin. In my opinion, really smart of Adian to do this. It occurs to him that they were with Archer Finn, and Archer Finn was willing to let Nikimia die for their cause, even though she was literally like a princess of one of the continents, still giving the king pushback. So Adian's like, you know what? I'm not going to tell them where Aelin is for now, and I do think that's really, really smart. So then they start discussing everyone who survived the attack on Terrasen, because they all like scattered to the winds, but there are people out there who still exist. One specifically that they discuss in this conversation is a girl named Alide. Alide is the daughter of a woman who we will find out more about later, but Allied escaped. We don't know where she went, we don't know where she is, but we know that she at least survived the attack on Terrasen. Remember that name, remember that name, remember that name, do not forget that name. We also learned that not only was Adian selected to be Aylin's sword and sworn protector, but he was also supposed to be the one person who took Aylin's blood oath, which is a very big deal in Fae culture. But honestly, we're gonna have to like discuss that more later, but it is like a very, very big deal. Adian is supposed to take the blood oath from Aylin. Chapter 25, Rowan and Selena POV. Training's not going very well because she's still like not fully in control of her shift. And even when she does manage to shift, her magic just goes haywire. So they come across Mala's temple, which I guess Rowan thinks that being there is going to help her like tap into her magic better. But in reality, it just makes her more jumpy because let's just say that her family history is a little bit tricky. Here's one of those conversations where I think the author just put it in to kind of quiet people who were claiming there were plot holes in the first couple books. In my opinion, it doesn't really play to the plot, but she basically does answer why did the humans beat the Fae when Aderlin invaded Terrasen, which rightfully so. It's like, okay, how did that happen? It doesn't seem realistic as far as a fantasy book is concerned, but basically Rowan says that magic disappeared before the attack on Terrasen, and apparently the Fae of Terrasen relied way too heavily on their magic, so that when they didn't have their magic, they didn't really know how to tap into their raw and natural Fae power, and that's why they were conquered by Aderlin. So in case that was something that was bothering you or you were wondering about, there you go. We also learned that Maeve did not help, but she did offer sanctuary to any of the Fae who could make it to Dornael from Terrasen, and she would give them sanctuary, but she didn't actually help or assist at all in the attack on Terrasen. So they're walking through the woods and they find a body. Plot twist, right? Or at least what's left of a body. She looks like she's had the life sucked out of her, is the words that are used. And they realize that the scent on the body matches the scent of like that freakish being that was in the cemetery that attacked Selena. And now we get murder mystery solving Rowan and Selena, which in my opinion is like such a fun side quest for them to go on, but I really enjoy it. And it does kind of add like a fun bit of flavor to the book. So they study and analyze the scene, and it's time to head back before it gets dark. But Selena refuses to leave until they bury the body, and surprisingly, Rowan respects that decision and he lets her do it. Chapter 26, we're going to start in Kale's POV. Kale hears a rumor that Dorian is seeing someone, and Kale's actually really happy for him because he's like, you know what, he deserves a little bit of happiness, even if it seems foolish that it's not going to work out. Like, good for him that he's at least like making the most of a dark time in his life. And like, true. Okay, now also a fun fact, Selena had a secret apartment for when she was an assassin, like pre-end-of-year salt mine camp days, but like when she left the Assassin's Keep. So there's like a tiny gap of time there that we're going to talk about in Assassin's Blade. She like bought an actual apartment and lived in an apartment for a little bit. And do you remember in book 2, Selena had a will that Kale found, and she left everything to Kale, and she told him that like even though she hates his guts that she wasn't gonna take him out of her will. Well, apparently she left this apartment to Kale in her will. And that's where he wants to meet Adian. So that's like their new secret meeting spot that's not like the Rebel building. Because if you think about it, it's really careless for them to keep meeting there. So Kale's waiting for Adian in this apartment, and he starts thinking about Arobin Hummel and how much he hates him and how much he's like, you know what, if I ever saw Arobin on the street, I might not be able to resist unaliving him on the spot. But he also thankfully does recognize that that's kind of Aylin's call what happens to him, and so he's gonna let Selena have her way with Arobin whenever she feels like it's a good time. But then he's also surprised that she hasn't tried to get even with him yet. Adian shows up. We're actually going to jump to Adian's POV because he's looking around at everything and he's getting very overwhelmed. He has basically been punishing himself for the past 10 years for losing Aylin that day that Terrasen was attacked by serving the king, which if you ask me, I don't see how that's helping anything, if not making it worse, but I guess that's the point. That was him punishing himself by serving the man that he hated. To each their own and how they grieve, but to me that just seems like a really unhealthy way and almost unlogical way to grieve, but Okay. Basically, he's realizing as he's looking around this room that nothing is ever going to separate him from Aelin again when he finds her. So he's like, I need to find her and get her back, and I'm never letting her out of my sight again. A little, and by little, I mean a lot, of territorialness and hyper protectiveness going on here. You'll learn that about Aedion very quickly. He's very possessive of Aelin, and obviously we know Celaena very well, and we, as you can probably guess, she doesn't really handle people feeling possessive over her very well. So you'll see how that plays out, but it's worded very strongly, and I think that's very intentional by Sarah J. Maas in this moment to show you, like, he's almost like unhealthily obsessed with keeping Celaena safe, or Aelin safe. As you remember, one of Chaol's 3 goals before he moves back to Aniel with his father is he wants to find out how magic disappeared and how the rebels plan to get it back, because he's heard that rumor. Well, Aedion shares with him that he does have an inkling of why magic disappeared, and he basically lays out a map for him and talks about birds. And this is really confusing to me. It's very interesting. Chaol is very annoyed with how vague he is, but Aedion's basically like, well, I'm not going to give you all the information up front. Like, I'll give you bit by bit, and as I trust you, I'll give you more. Basically says that due to the flying pattern of certain birds from certain regions, they believe that there's definite lines where magic starts and stops. I'm not sure if he states in this chapter, but a couple chapters later, he will definitely state that they think it's like a triangle, like somewhere, and he won't point on the maps where, and I think that's what makes Chaol so upset, is he's like not really giving him any information, but he's basically like, I don't know what's maybe like the beacon, but for some reason there's 3 points somewhere on the continent, and anything between these 3 points within this triangle does not have any magic. And Chaol, of course, is annoyed because he's basically told Aedion everything, and he's held no cards to his chest whatsoever, but Aedion's being smarter than him, and that bothers Chaol. So they're basically just bonded over, like, the same convictions, but they definitely don't have the same end goal, per se. Honestly, I don't even think Chaol knows what Chaol wants at this point, so I can't really speak for him, but I definitely don't think that Chaol wants what Aedion wants. It does seem kind of contradictory, because although Aedion just told Ren and Murtaugh that they can trust Chaol, Aedion, I think he's pulling back a little bit on that, because it's occurring to him like this man has been blindly loyal to the king for years, and all of a sudden he's had a change of heart because of Celaena. But at the same time, like, what if his feelings for Celaena leave? Like, is this really his values, or is this just like a, I don't know what to do, I'm doing what I think is right? Because if that's the case, then Chaol could turn on them on a dime. On another point entirely, Aedion basically tells Chaol, like, hey, I know Dorian says he wants no part in it, and I know you don't want Dorian to have a part in this, but we might need him to play a part in this. And Chaol refuses to even entertain the idea. He's like, no. Speaking of Dorian, let's jump to his POV, because he's been spending basically every single day with Sorsha, and he like keeps finding excuses. Honestly, it's almost concerning how often Dorian is like inflicting pain on himself just so he can summon Sorsha to his room so they can spend a couple minutes together. But she has been helping him research magic and then coming to him on those evenings with more information. And she thinks she's found a way to help him stabilize his magic, and that is iron. So obviously there's iron in our bloodstream, and Dorian thinks that's because the gods are trying to control magical beings from being too powerful. She's like, I have anemic patients who I give iron supplements to. She's like, what if we create like an iron supplement, or like a iron elixir that has a lot of iron in it, and then you just take that and it will help you kind of suppress your magic. And Dorian's like, yeah, sounds great, let's do it. So he takes the supplements. I think he ends up taking elixir daily following this event, but like for the first night he takes the supplements because that's what she has on hand, and he starts to think about things that make him really upset and emotional, because that's how his magic is triggered. And he basically does like have like a moment where he's like spiraling because he's thinking a little too hard about things that make him emotional, and he's basically thinking about the betrayal of Chaol not telling him everything and how chaotic things would have been if him and Celaena did end up dating for real. Because remember, they were romantically involved for a bit there. Can you imagine if they were like seriously dating and he found out she was Aelin Galathynius? Like, that would have been catastrophic. So he's thinking about all these things. He's thinking about how horrible of a person his father is. He's thinking about the throne he might inherit. He's thinking about the fact that he's inheriting a throne means that he couldn't be with Sorsha. And he has this moment where he like feels the magic release, like he gets to that point, but then no magic actually releases. So the iron supplements work. And he's so thrilled and so happy that he just grabs Sorsha and plants one on her. And they kiss, and it's perfect, and I love it. It's honestly one of the cutest moments in the entire book. Chapter 27, Manon's POV. So Manon's on her way to visit Abraxos because she still has to train with him separately until he can learn how to fly. She has Astrid, her second, and her cousin summon the 13 and train together without her. And this is where Astrid actually reveals that the Blackbeak matron has been asking Astrid to spy on Manon to not let her train Abraxos alone. Because at this point, the matron is really just trying to humiliate Manon and punish her for what she thinks to be a really unwise decision. And so she wants Manon to like face the consequences. But Manon's like, no, I'm gonna train Abraxos alone. I'm going to make sure that he's ready so that when I fly with you guys, I can actually take my place as Coven leader like I'm meant to. Thankfully, we love Astrid. Astrid's amazing. And she's like, you know what? Like, I'd rather be a good second than a good spy. Best answer, if you ask me. So Manon is walking to where Abraxos is kept, and she's thinking about how weird the place smells again. Guys, I know I keep bringing this up, but I need you to focus on it. Especially for those of you who are reading along with these videos. By the way, I love that you guys do that. The amount of DMs and comments that I've gotten saying that you guys are reading the books for the first time along with these videos makes my heart so happy. Obviously, I feel like it's come up like 5 or 6 times, but I feel like those kinds of details are so easy to skim over, especially in the witch chapters, because if you're a first time reader, chances are the witch chapters are kind of annoying to you. So you're gonna skim right over it, but I beg you not to, especially not this detail. Anyways, she's talking about how the guards are also acting more strange on top of smelling more strange. Then on top of that, she noticed that the number of guards is dwindling. None of this is sitting right with her. We do find out later that some of the witches are like luring and seducing some of the guards away and then killing them and like drinking their blood, because that's what witches do. It's not really relevant to the story. I think we find out in like a chapter. Anyway, so there's something else. So she's going to get Abraxos, and then one of the wyvern trainers comes up and basically tells her like, hey, he's not fit for battle and he's also not fit for flying, so you're better off just picking a different mount. They basically get in this verbal battle because Manon's like, how dare you like insinuate that I made the wrong decision? And he's starting to get really aggravated, and one of his hands gets a little too close for Manon, so she decides that she's going to teach him a lesson. She goes to like smack his hand away, but girl has iron claws, so she like gashes his hand. In the sickest intimidation tactic ever, she goes to like lick the blood off her nails in front of him to like basically remind him that she's a lethal weapon and he should not be getting in her face about these kinds of things. But as she's walking away, she's like, okay, that was not human blood. Like, that blood tastes weird. And on top of that, it's not even a normal red color. If this seems fishy to you, it's because it is. Like, we've seen 10 red flags now about weird stuff going on in the North Fang Mountains. Anyway, so she gets to Abraxos' pen and she starts talking to him, and basically she's like, I'm your master. You're my mount. I'm the greatest in my coven, so you need to be the greatest in our coven. And he seems to actually respond to this in understanding. A lot of the wyvern trainers keep telling them that they don't understand any more than dogs do, and in my opinion, I think dogs understand way more than we give them credit for. Manon is like, no, Abraxos is a very intelligent beast. So she turns to the trainers because she basically found out that the way that they've been training him has been to quite literally like beat it out of him. So they've basically been abusing Abraxos, and she turns to him and she's like, if you guys bring another whip near my mount, you're dead. So thankfully we've put an end to that, and she basically sends them away. And so when they leave and it's just her and him in the pen, Abraxos actually really chills out. So she's able to put a saddle on him and assess some of his injuries, and then she lets the people in charge of preparing him for battle know, like, okay, here are the changes I want made to him, here's like what I want his armor to look like, blah 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 blah. And now that he trusts her, she's been able to train with him a little bit, but they're still not quite airborne. Anyways, we'll get back to that in a bit, but we're actually going to flash forward to Manon goes up to Sorrel. Sorrel is her third, so basically the one underneath Astrid. Actually, wait, I wrote it down because I thought this is really cool. Okay, so this is how they describe the personalities, and I honestly think this is perfect. Manon is ice, Astrid is fire, and Sorrel is the rock. I think that is quite literally the best way to describe these three witches' personalities. So yeah, if that helps you in any way define Sorrel in your brain, I think that's perfect. Anyway, so Sorrel is basically overseeing the training of some of the younger witches and like some of the, obviously like the 13 is a coven, but the Blackbeaks have multiple covens, and it's basically the youngest coven, and apparently the leader is super weak. Manon basically says it's unacceptable because apparently there's going to be a war games that's going to basically help the king and the matron witches decide which clan is going to be leading the war effort, and Manon's like, we're only as strong as our weakest coven, so either this coven leader needs to get her act together or she's gone. So yeah, very cutthroat environment if you ask me. And then Manon tells them that Abraxos is going to be airborne by next week. Internally, she knew it was a lie, and based off Sorrel's reaction, Sorrel knew it was a lie too. So we're just going to have to wait and see how that goes. I'm very excited about chapter 28 because this is the first Rowan POV that we get ever. So they're going on a field trip, but the location is 20 miles away, and he informs Aelin that they will be running both ways, and he wants to spend a good bit of the day there, so she needs to shift. He also lets her know that he's noticed that every single time that she's been able to shift, it's because that she's been very angry and frustrated in the moment, and that she's had to go to a very dark place. And he's like, you know what, that works for now, but maybe in the future we shouldn't need to make you a rageful, angry person in order to shift, so maybe we should work on that. So he tries to channel her anger by fighting her because he knows that she can't handle the fact that he's stronger and faster than her, and sure enough, it works, and she shifts. So they're able to run to this village. And in my opinion, this is honestly one of the sweetest, most underestimated scenes in this entire book. But they're basically like running through the woods together at like Fae speed. And she talks about like how freeing it feels and how she's enjoying testing the limits of her Fae body. And it feels like the first time where we see Aelin actually loving being a Fae. And there's even a moment, because we jumped to Aelin's POV for this part, where out of the corner of her eye, she can see that Rowan is smiling. Like he's genuinely enjoying like just like sprinting through the woods with her. So like they have this little bonding moment, I guess. And it's also, I think, a very healing moment for Aelin to not hate her Fae body. It's very beautiful, it's very emotional. And of course, 20 miles goes by way too fast, obviously at the speed that they're running for sure. But then also like, they were just having a lot of fun. So she's like, oh, I can't wait till we have to run back, you know, it's cute. So he gives her a change of clothes so that they can blend in. And so they change and they go into the village, and the people are being very cagey and hardly talking to them. So Celaena's like, hey, what's going on here? So Rowan actually shares that the humans near Dornael hate the Fae. It explains why they needed the clothes to look a little more human, but basically we learn a little more politics about how Maeve ran her kingdom. And Rowan tells Celaena all this in a very politically correct way because, mind you, he services right under Queen Maeve, so he does need to not sound like he's been critical of her at all. I'm gonna sound a little more critical because I am, but Fae stole and plundered and basically took advantage of the human for years, and it went unchecked for a really, really long time. It wasn't until fairly recently that Maeve decided to get it under control, and it's actually Rowan's job and the other men that Rowan works with to enforce this, but at the same time, like, stuff still happens because it's just like, you know, culture struggling to catch up. And Celaena realizes like, oh, we just need to buy some stuff, and he's like, wait, what? So she like grabs his money, I guess, and she goes into a sweet shop because in my opinion, if I had cash and I'm in a village and I see a sweet shop, that's also where I'm spending my money first. So she goes and she buys a bunch of these really nice chocolates, and they go to a couple other stores and buy a couple other things, and all the people in the village are like, oh, they're here to buy stuff, and they have a good bit of money because I guess Rowan gets paid well for his job. So they're buying stuff, so naturally all the sellers in the village are like trying to lure them in, and of course now they're very willing to talk with them about stuff. So they don't like obviously solve the murder talking to these people, but I do to guess they get a bit more information that kind of helps them like get a fuller picture of what's going on. And they just get a little bit more insight. And now it's time to head back at the end of the day. So they get back to Mistward and Aelin falls asleep and she starts to have a dream of her mother. Now she's actually, this is more of a memory than a dream. She's actually remembering something that did happen. One tidbit here that I think is really precious is that we find out that Aelin's mother called her Fireheart, and I think that's a really sweet nickname. So if you watch like Throne of Glass TikToks or something and someone says Fireheart, like they're talking about Aelin, so the more you know. But she remembers her and her father having an argument that her magic was out of check because apparently she was in a library and she like caught a bunch of books on fire in the royal library, and they're also concerned that she has no friends except for Aedion, her cousin. We also get a cute little peek into like Aedion and Aelin when they were kids, and basically like they were each other's best friends, but also we find out Aelin was a big reader, so all of her best friends were either characters in books or Aedion. Her parents basically find out that Aelin and Aedion were overhearing the conversation, and they said, you know what, it's late, like we'll talk about this tomorrow. But that's actually the night that Terrasen invades and the night that her parents are brutally murdered. So she actually never got to have that conversation with them. And that was like her last memory of her parents. Chapter 29, we are in Sorsha's POV. So we ended on a sad note and now we're gonna go to a happy note because she cannot stop thinking about that kiss, and girl, me neither. Love anything Sorsha Dorian. Like it literally warms my heart so much. Anyway, so she's been coming to his rooms every single day to give him his iron dosage for the day. And he does seem on edge because he doesn't really understand why she's helping him. Like for some reason, Dorian's all of a sudden getting really skeptical about why Sorsha's helping him so much, because not only would he get killed if people found out about his magic, but she would get killed too for not only knowing about it, but trying to help him hide it. And she basically just says, I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. And that's the only answer she'll give him. And he realizes like, oh, I've not been able to trust anyone in my life, but maybe Sorsha's just like a really good person. I'm not crying. I'm not crying. I'm not crying. You know how I said this was a happier chapter? Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm gonna cry here too. Back to Sorsha's POV. She is struggling because she loves Dorian, she really does, but obviously nothing could ever happen between a healer and the prince. But she decides that, you know what, I never do anything for myself, and frankly, I don't care that he's the prince. So she turns back around, because I guess she was about to leave his rooms, and she grabs him and she plants one on him and she kisses him, basically to let him know like, hey, I know you kissed me last night and I didn't really reciprocate it, so you were probably confused about whether or not I actually wanted that, but yeah, I want this. And thus Sorshan, or Dorsha, whichever you prefer, they become like an official thing. We're gonna jump to Chaol's POV because he's about to meet Ren, Murtaugh, and Aedion, and he is having a lot of guilt for being a traitor. This is exactly what Aedion was afraid of. Remember, he's like, he's always been so loyal to the king, and now he's had this change of heart. Like, what if he has another change of heart? Chaol is really struggling with being a traitor, so this is exactly what Aedion was nervous about. This starts a very long string of contradicting emotions for Chaol, and we'll develop that for a while, but this is kind of where it first starts to like really haunt him. Aedion doesn't understand why Chaol's so on edge and in a rush, so Chaol actually opens up to Aedion about his deal with his dad about leaving in 3 months, and this earns Aedion's respect, I guess. And they're basically making fun of how horrible Chaol's dad is, and Chaol's like, all right, enough crap on my dad, like how sucky's your dad? And Aedion basically reveals that he has no clue who his dad is. His mother, who's now dead, she always told him like that out of protection for him, she was never going to tell him who his father was. So whoever his dad is, it's dangerous for him to know him. Anyway, so Ren comes around the corner, I guess, for wherever they were waiting to meet up. He's in a panic because there were guards waiting for him and now he's wounded. And Murtaugh's like basically practically carrying him because his middle was basically sliced and he's basically trying to keep his organs from falling out at this point. Sorry to get a little too graphic for you. Trust me, I'm way less graphic than the book is. They basically decide to hide because Aedion whips out his sword and he's like, I've got this. And this is the first time we see Aedion fight. And basically Kale describes it as the same exact style and brutality. Like, he's never seen anyone except for Aelin fight like that. So yeah, he's really good. Like, scary good. And in a matter of minutes, he drops 6 guards to the ground, and he doesn't have a single scratch on him. So Kale goes to inspect the bodies because he's assuming they're his men, right? They're not. These are guards who you would assume work for the king, but they're not wearing like your usual kingdom guard uniform. They're wearing black uniforms with a wyvern on them. Remember that. Chapter 30, we're still in Aedion and Kale's POV. They basically run to an opium den because Ren points it out and says that they can hide there. They basically run in, and the lady working at the opium den knows Ren apparently very well. They all pretend to be drug addicts so that when the other guards run in to try to like find the people who just killed 6 guards, they overlook Ren and Murtaugh and Aedion and Kale. So they move and leave, and Kale's like, you know what, we're gonna address the fact that Ren is a regular here later, but right now we just need to make sure he gets out of this alive. So the guards leave, and the lady who's running this den, she does have stuff for Ren, I guess, and so they're able to treat him. He's gonna be fine, but recovery is gonna be a nightmare, that's all you know. Kale basically asks, all right, where's your home? Like, we can make sure you guys get back there safely. And we basically find out that Ren and Murtaugh have been homeless this entire time. They haven't been staying anywhere. Like, they've just been hopping place to place, day to day, and night to night. And so Kale offers them an apartment, and he's just basically like, hey, I have an apartment, I'm not using it, you guys can stay there. He doesn't tell them it's Aelin's apartment, but it's Aelin's apartment. We finally get to why we met up in the first place, which is the 3 beacons that are keeping magic out. Honestly, it's kind of weird because there's not really anything else discovered at the end of this chapter, so I don't know why it needed its own meeting, but basically they are like, we need to find out what the beacon is and destroy it. I think actually in this moment they do have 2 like general locations they think 2 of the beacons are at, but they don't know the 3rd location. And then on top of that, they don't know what these beacons look like or if they're even something physical at all, so they need to figure out what the beacon is so they can destroy it. Chapter 31, this is Manon's POV because Abraxos is still not flying yet. This is also where we find out that Abraxos is refusing to eat meat. So Manon at first is like, are you a vegetarian? Like, what's going on here? Basically realizes he seems like afraid of the meat, so she goes to take a bite of it herself. She just goes to take a bite of raw dead goat. That kind of grosses me out a little bit, but she's not human, so I guess she won't get salmonella from that. But she takes a bite of this goat and then she spits it out because it tastes the same way that the blood of the guard tasted. And on top of that, it also smells like the guard smell. Guys, are you catching a weird pattern here? You should be. So basically she's like, okay, this is unacceptable. So she takes him out and she hunts down a goat with her bare hands and kills it, gives it to Abraxos, and he eats it. So the issue is really the meat that's being provided by the king's men. So the matron is beyond angry, and this is where we learn that Manon came to see Abraxos today because she has 24 hours before Abraxos has to be airborne, or she's getting kicked out of the clan. So she's like, okay, this is no longer optional. So she somehow wrestles him into a saddle and he's trying to buck her off. Like, it's a whole thing. She, mind you, in order to try to get him to fly, she like took him out to a field. And mind you, they're in the mountains, so it's basically like a cliff's edge. And as he's bucking her off, he loses sense of where the edge is and then missteps and falls down the side of a mountain. Chapter 32, Abraxas and Manon are falling down the side of a mountain in a dead drop. And basically they're going to die, and it's like this really big intense moment, and Manon basically just keeps screaming at Abraxos to like kick his wings out. So of course, as it always happens in the movies, so I'm sure you can imagine it, he like flings out his wings in the last second before they hit the ground, and he's able to get the wind from under him and fly. And it is actually a really beautiful and sweet moment because Abraxos has experienced flying freely for the first time in his life, and same with Manon. She hasn't flown on a wyvern before, so they kind of have their like Harry Potter and Hedwig moment, and they're just enjoying flying together. So Abraxos is officially ready to fly with the rest of the 13 coven. So flash forward to the next morning, Manon lets her 13 know that Abraxos is airborne, and now they're officially going to train together. But she wants the 13 to train together privately, always train together, never train with any of the other covens because they are going to land on top. A lot of this also stems from her distrust in the king's men, so she's like, whatever happens, like, we do not get separated. Chapter 33, we're gonna jump to Celaena's POV because instead of shift, her new command has been to control her magic. And the recent torture that Rowan's putting her through is forcing her to light a candle because that has to take a lot of control just to have one tiny flame, because her thing is whenever she uses her fire magic, she basically explodes a bunch of blue wildfire and practically wipes out anything within a couple feet radius of her. Lighting a candle is proving very challenging for Celaena. So every night after training, she eats some food in the back of the kitchens and listens to some of the campfire stories that are told. And every night she can see Rowan in his hawk form sitting in the window, also privately listening to the stories. One night she decides to speak up when Emerys is taking story suggestions, and she asks if he has any stories about Maeve. He says that he does know a lot and basically says, what do you want to know? And she says, tell me everything. I want to know everything. Like, tell me her history. Tell me everything about how she got to where she is today. And so Emerys decides to start at the beginning. And mind you, this is like pages of information, so you're welcome for the summary. Long ago, when there was no mortal king on Wendellin's throne, the fairies still walked among us. Some were good and fair, some were prone to little mischiefs, and some were fouler and darker than the blackest night. But they were all ruled by Maeve and her two sisters, whom they called Mora and Mab. Cunning Mora, who bore the shape of a great hawk, aka Rowan's bloodline, and fair Mab, who bore the shape of a swan, and the dark mauve, whose wildness could not be contained by any single form. So we just learned that Maeve does not have an animal form. Interesting. I actually did not catch that the first time I read the book, so the fact that I caught that this time was like kind of crazy for me. Emerys recited the history, much of which Celaena knew. Mora and Mab had fallen in love with human men and yielded their immortality. Some said Maeve forced them to give up their gift of eternal life as punishment for marrying immortal men. Some said that they wanted to, if only to escape their sister Maeve. Celaena then asks if Maeve ever had a mate. And apparently there's this rumor that she did love a warrior, but he died in battle, and that's basically why she surrounds herself with the best fae warriors out there, like Rowan. So Emerys tells them stories late into the night about Maeve, and then through the window, Celaena sees a mountain cat walking up to Mistward, and this thing is like capable of unaliving some people. Like, this is a very intimidating animal, and she's like freaking out that it's approaching Mistward, but then it shifts into a fae, and then Rowan shifts from a hawk into a fae as well and goes to talk to this man. So Celaena shifts to her fae form so that she can overhear the conversation with her fae hearing, and basically learns that this fae's name is Gavriel. And he's basically been looking for Rowan for weeks because something very upsetting has happened, but we're not quite sure what that is because they end up walking into Mistward and going to Rowan's rooms, so they're no longer in earshot. Celaena, whether it's out of actually trying to be a good friend or because she's nosy, or both frankly, is not really certain, but she does get like some soup and bread and decides to take them to Rowan's rooms for his friend Gavriel, thinking that he may need it because he seemed like he was very distressed. And she walks in and Gavriel is laying shirtless on Rowan's table, and Rowan is bent over him, giving him a tattoo. Rowan is ticked off about this intrusion by Celaena and basically like chews her out. She apologizes and leaves, and honestly she feels stupid in this moment because she was expecting Rowan to think that she was being thoughtful and helpful, so him being mad at her actually makes her mad. So she goes to leave to go back to her rooms, but Rowan storms out of his rooms and basically follows her to chew her out and basically tells her that we're not friends and my life is none of your business. Like, I don't know why you think we're friends, but we're not. Like, I'm here to train you and that's it. And basically he says, I don't care about you, so I would prefer that you don't care about me. And something about that just rips my heart out just a little bit. Chapter 34, we are still in Celaena's POV, and she is doing her kitchen duties in the morning. And Emerys is showing her a dagger or knife that his mate had bought him, and Celaena freaks out because Honestly, I've never fully understood why this is a big deal, but apparently it's like an eelway knife, and she's able to tell that by looking at it. This causes her to have a meltdown because it makes her think about Nehemia, and she lashes out at Emerys. In my opinion, I know she's going through a lot, but this to me makes no sense, and it's inexcusable. But she lashes out at Emerys, but Luca and Emerys's mate Malachi go to defend Emerys and basically like tell Celaena, like, if you're gonna act like that, go away, like leave. He doesn't deserve this. And so Celaena does leave. And when Rowan goes down to the kitchens to pick up Celaena, obviously she's not there because she's basically been kicked out. Emerys, in pure gutsy fashion, chews out Rowan, basically says, we know who she is. Apparently Evelyn, and Evelyn is Aelin's mother. Evelyn was at Mistward for years before going to Terrasen and taking up her place as royalty there. And he basically says, like, this girl needs comfort and she needs help and she's been through some serious stuff and she needs support right now and she needs a friend, not someone who's gonna drill sergeant her and yell at her and basically ignore all the trauma she's been through. I love Emerys for this because he has every reason to be mad at her, but he just basically went to bat for her with probably the most intimidating fae he will ever meet. Sorry, I get very passionate about this moment because I think it's really underestimated. Rowan goes outside to find Celaena, and of course she's crying, so he goes to sit with her and asks her, like, do you want to talk about it? And she says no, and he says thank goodness. He's like, I have an idea for training today. So he takes her to a cave, and apparently Celaena refers to this as a cave of nightmares, and there's a lake in this cave and it's frozen over, and guess who is sitting wrapped in chains in the middle of a frozen lake? Luca. How Luca got from the kitchens to this cave in this time, I'm not really sure, but it happens. Don't question it. And Rowan just basically says, okay, go get him. So basically she needs to be in her fae form in order to like get to him and be able to hear the cracks in the ice and like navigate to him safely. But at the same time, she can't lose control of her magic because she would then melt the ice and her and Luca would fall into this frozen pond. First of all, she's ticked at Rowan, so she chews him out. But then she starts to cross the ice and it's growing and crackling all the way, but she did shift into her fae form, so she's able to like navigate her way through the ice, and she does get to Luca. But as she starts to try to help him take the chains off, he starts talking about how the cave smells funny to him. Interesting, huh? Very interesting. And she can see that there's like waves of water under the ice, so she's realizing that Rowan is using his ice and wind magic to freeze over the river, because if there's a strong current in the water, it's not going to freeze over like this. So she thinks that's very interesting, and she kind of takes a mental note to also just rip him to shreds after this. So she gets all the chains off Luca. They start to walk back, and then she sees something moving under the ice, and she looks down and she sees a pair of red eyes looking up at her through the ice. Chapter 34. She sees these red eyes, and then she sees teeth, and she screams at Luca to run. He starts running back to the shore. She basically says it's something between a wyvern and a fish. So basically think like a demonic shark. Like that's kind of what I'm envisioning here. And even Rowan is yelling at her to run. So this is no longer a part of her training. So the thing shoots up through the ice to try to like snatch Aelin in its teeth. And it does miss her, but because of like the trajectory of him breaking the ice, it like shoots Celaena across the ice. She's trying to control her emotions, because if she freaks out and loses control of her magic, she's gonna melt the ice, and then they're all gonna be stuck in the water right now. The ice is the only thing keeping her and this monster separated. So Rowan takes a sword that suspiciously he happens to find in the cave in that very moment. Interesting. And slides it across the ice to her to basically have a way to defend herself. So she takes the scabbard, puts it on her, and she takes the sword out of it. But when she does, apparently there's like a ring that was in the scabbard, a gold ring. So she decides to pocket it. She takes out the sword, and she does end up making it to the shore. She doesn't need to use it. She doesn't need to fight the monster with it. And they basically, the three of them, book it out of that cave as fast as humanly possible. They do make it out in time. And they notice that the creature, although it got out of the water and it was able to crawl towards the mouth of the cave, it isn't able to actually leave the cave. So that's very interesting. And it basically just like roars a roar of defeat, whatever that may sound like. You can use your imagination there, and they're safe. So they head back to Mistward. She basically gives Rowan the scolding of his life, because not only did she almost die, but Luca, a sweet little half-fae boy, almost died because of his training methods. So she gets in a couple good hints, and basically Rowan lets her, but then he throws her to the ground and pins her down. And she says, look, I'll go through whatever crazy training methods that you want to do. She's like, but you are not allowed to include anyone else. No one else is going to get hurt because of my inability to use magic. And Rowan's basically like, why? So she says, I told her I would not help her, so she orchestrated her own death because she thought that her death would spur me into action. She thought I could somehow do more than her, that she was worth more dead. And she lied about everything. She lied to me because I was a coward, and I hate her for it. I hate her for leaving me. Please don't bring anyone else into it. I will do anything you ask of me, but that is my line. Anything else but that. So basically, because Nehemia sacrificed herself for the sake of Aelin tapping into her power, she doesn't want anyone else to die for the sake of Aelin learning how to use her power. So Rowan asks, how did she die? And Aelin shares she manipulated a mutual acquaintance into thinking that he needed to kill her in order to further his agenda. He hired an assassin and made sure I wasn't around and had her murdered. And then when Rowan asks her what happened to these two men, she says, the assassin I hunt down and I left in pieces in an alleyway. And the man who hired him, I gutted him and dumped his body into the sewer. And Rowan just says, good. Bonding moment, I guess. And then she informs him like, hey, you know that sword that you found in the cave and then slid towards me? Perfect timing. For some reason, I'm not going to ask you about that. I'm just going to let you know that I'm keeping the sword. And surprisingly, he doesn't fight her on it. He lets her keep it. So they go back inside to eat and clean up. And basically, Emerys is mortified that her and Rowan and Luca look as disheveled as they do. But he decides not to ask any questions. Then Emerys leans over to Selena and congratulates her for getting a couple punches in on Rowan because I guess he has some bruises. After they finish eating, Aelin goes to do the dishes because that's like her job. And Rowan goes over and helps her do the dishes. Something about that's just cute. I don't know. So Aelin asks if Emerys knows any story about the Bald Mountains, because apparently that's where they just were when they saw the creature. So fun fact, my camera just died and I have like less than a minute or two left and I don't feel like charging my battery for 2 hours just to film this last little portion. So we're doing this on iPhone quality, so bear with me here. So she asks for stories about the Bald Mountain and it's kind of a long story, but basically the lore is that the creature slipped in from another world while the gods were looking the other way, and he wanted to feast on humans and fae, but a fae warrior found him and fought him and cursed him to be stuck in that cave. It was so long ago that the name of this creature has actually been lost even in the lore. The only detail that's really like carried out through history that all the storytellers remember is that the fae warrior was remembered for a gold ring. What did Aelin find when she pulled this sword that Rowan found out of its scabbard? A golden ring. So it's occurred to Aelin that she thinks that this is the golden ring of that fae warrior, and she thinks that this sword is also belonging to that fae warrior. So anyway, she cannot sleep later that night because she actually feels really bad. When her and Rowan got in a fight, like, yeah, she got a couple hits in, but apparently she also activated her fire magic, and so she left like some handprints on him and like burns. So she decides to go and apologize to Rowan. This is also where we learn that through Mab, apparently Aelin has a little bit of healing power in her blood, but since queens were never healers, she was never even taught how to tap into that magic. So Rowan's like, maybe that's a problem we can tackle another day. So promise for future? Interesting. But then he dismisses her help and saying like, well, you don't have your healing power, so I'll just see you for training in the morning. As she's walking out, he stops her and he says, wait, I want to tell you a story. And he tells her the story of his mate who was killed, specifically 204 years and 27 days ago. And basically points out that the tattoo in the fae language that's all over his body is detailing the story of her death. He makes tattoos that share the stories of grief, and that's why fae, like Gavriel, whenever something traumatic happens to them, they ask Rowan to add it to their tattoo of the story of their grief. And apparently Gavriel just lost some men and he blames himself for it, so he wanted the story of what happened tattooed on his body. So Rowan tattoos it on himself, and he also tattoos his grief on other people's bodies too. I guess that's like his side hobby. But as for the story of his mate, because this is really important, he shares that he blames himself for her death. Her name was
Lyria, and she was pregnant, which is super rare with the Fae. But he was called to fight in a war, and Lyria begged him not to go, but he went anyways, and he basically got a reputation for being a very successful warrior in battle. But then one day he got news that the enemy was going to basically go through the mountains where Lyria was living. In his hawk form, like flew back there as fast as possible, but he was too late, and the villagers went through the village and basically killed everyone who was there, including Lyria. Lyria and the baby died, and he blames himself for that. And also, I know we talked a little bit about like what mates are, but fun fact, if you lose your mate, so for whatever reason your mate dies before you do, you go crazy. And that's not even just like a funny saying, like he actually went crazy. And apparently he disappeared for 10 years and went psycho, got revenge on all the people who he found out were responsible for killing Lyria and his baby. After his 10 years of going crazy and getting revenge, Maeve summoned him, and basically that's how he became one of her warriors. And she asked him to serve alongside her as prince and commander. So that's kind of Rowan's backstory. So he opens up to Celaena about all that. They basically decide together that they're going to work through their grief together, because that was him basically being like, you know what, you told me about Nehemia, I'm going to tell you about Lyria, and although you didn't lose your mate, you still lost someone close to you, and I've had hundreds of years to recover and I'm still not okay, but it's still very fresh for you, so we're both clearly going through it, so let's just be there for each other. The most iconic sentence in probably this entire book. And somewhere far and deep inside Aelin, an ember began to glow. Chapter 36. We're in Adian's POV, and we are in Celaena's old apartment. We are with Ren, we are with Murtaugh, and I believe Kale is there as well. Basically, they're realizing everything with the opium den and how well connected Ren is, that Ren maybe has some skeletons in his closet. And maybe he doesn't have what it takes in him to be a lord again. Like, say Aelin does take up her throne again, is Ren really going to be able to go back to being a lord? And they're realizing all of them have changed so much in the past 10 years that most people probably aren't going to be worthy of the positions. Take Adian, for example. He's literally Aelin's sworn shield and protector, and he has now been serving the king for the past 10 years. That's not a good look. The important topic here, though, is Kale, especially to Adian, because no one really knows what Kale stands for, and we actually will get into that a little bit more in this like section of the book. They don't really know who or what he's fighting for, but then also, is he going to be able to do what needs to be done when the time comes? Because he has been very fickle in where his loyalties are, or so we believe. Something even more bonkers is as they're talking about like what Terrasen will look like if all these people who've been in hiding for 10 years start jumping back into their old positions and roles, Ren brings up the fact that technically Adian was supposed to, they weren't betrothed or anything, but it was kind of just like accepted that the likelihood of Adian and Aelin marrying each other was really high to kind of like solidify the bloodline, which for one is gross and bonkers because they're literally cousins. For two, it's weird because they've literally been best friends their whole lives. And for three, we know our girl Aelin. Do we really honestly think that she's just going to accept the fact that she doesn't get to decide who she marries? Guys, this is why I always put my hair up in these videos. I cannot like stop touching my hair and running my hands through it. I'm gonna like put it here, and we're just not gonna touch it. Same chapter, but we are gonna jump to Kale's POV. Him and Adian have decided that they're gonna be drinking buddies in public, because obviously it's gonna seem really sketchy if they're just hanging out secretly a lot and people are going to start having questions. So they've decided that they're going to pretend like they're just besties and buds now under the guise of the King of Adarlan's men. This is also where we find out that Kale is staying true to the promise to his father, and he actually is now looking for a replacement. So that's one step further to actually following through on his promise than he was before. So they're out drinking one night, the two of them, and Kale is realizing how much pull Adian has. Kale has the respect of his men, and he has relationships with a couple here and there, like Ress, I believe, is one that he's particularly close to. But Adian has, like, an insane amount of respect as a general. All of the people there have mad respect for him, they love him, and they seem like they would go into the fire for him. And this has Kale thinking, oh shoot,
what if, when Aelin comes back and Aedion helps her take up her throne, what if a bunch of these men just follow Aedion because they respect Aedion? The king of Adarlan isn't really doing much to garner people's respect. Most people who serve under the king of Adarlan, it's just like a loyalty to the crown kind of concept. But Aedion, despite the fact that he is very clearly Terrasen blood, he has a following. Then, this is where the plot thickens a little bit. A commander named Commander Jensen comes and sits next to them, and he shares a little bit of interesting information. So Commander Jensen was on an assignment stationed somewhere for like 5 years, and they were told that the king now has different men that they wanted on the assignment. So he told them all to come back to Adarlan with no communication for a future assignment. And they're stationed by volcanoes, guarding a tower. Now, I'm not going to spell it out for you, but do you remember in book 1? There was one reference to volcanoes. It kind of stuck out. I even told you to kind of pay attention to it. Are you catching what I'm putting down? Don't worry, if you're not catching it, or you don't remember that, or you didn't watch my recaps from the first book, you definitely should. But if you haven't, that's totally fine. Just remember it from now on. So apparently, a bunch of these guards working under Commander Jensen started getting these crazy weird headaches. Where have we heard crazy weird headaches coming up before out of nowhere? And then some of them started like going crazy in like themselves. But then, to make everything even more sketchy and weird, the king told Commander Jensen that he had to report these as being killed in action. I can't even begin to describe how much I totally grazed over this conversation the first time I read this book. This is why I'm doing this series. It wasn't until the second and even third time rereading these books where I'm like picking up stuff where I'm like, it was spelled out for us the entire time and we didn't see it. So you're welcome. So thankfully, Chaol uses his brain for the first time what feels like this entire book, and he makes a connection. Selena mentioned that when she went downstairs into that underground secret library in Crown of Midnight, remember that? It turns out that the secret tunnel led to under a tower, and when she was under/in this tower, she started getting these really weird headaches. Thank you, Chaol, for putting it together. So now this is twice that we're hearing of situations where people are near towers and getting headaches. Who else do we know that had these quote-unquote headaches for a long period of time and ended up going crazy? Caltaine. Do you know how we have now found out that magic disappeared in a triangle? Well, Chaol does some mind mapping, and he realizes that if on a map you draw a line from the clock tower in Adarlan to this tower by the volcano, you have one of the borders where magic disappeared. Which means that we now know what the beacons are, what they look like, where all magic is gone and where it is. And potentially how to get rid of it. The towers, not magic, obviously. This is also where Chaol decides that as much as he has tried to avoid it, he has no choice anymore. He needs to get Dorian involved. Chapter 37, this is a man in POV, but when I tell you guys, honestly, this chapter has some of the most insane foreshadowing in it, and I really need you to pay close attention. Honestly, if you ask me, this book probably has the least amount going on in it, and before people get mad at me, because I know this is a lot of people's favorite book, let me then follow that up quickly with, it has some of the most insane foreshadowing, probably of any of the books, for the second half of the series. Anyways, so this chapter is important. So 2 weeks have gone by and the 13 are all training together. And she hasn't necessarily told them why, but she told the 13 like, hey, we need to be hunting for meat for our wyverns outside of what the king's men are offering. And basically, she even tells the witches themselves, avoid the food given to you by the king's men at all costs. So as you would expect, they start performing significantly better than all the other covens who are there. To the point where Manon actually tells them, we need to start training privately and out of the eyesight of the other covens, because she doesn't really want people starting to ask questions. And now Manon and Abraxos are gonna go on a little mission, and we love a little side quest. So basically Abraxos' wings are not strong enough for battle, and there's nothing they've really tried to use that has actually been able to support his wings the way that they need it to, but Manon knows of something that can. It is called spider silk. Now this isn't just like your typical spider. I'll be 100% honest with you guys. This is one of those words in Throne of Glass that I've never even attempted to pronounce correctly because I just know I'm not even gonna get close. Stygian, Stygian. I feel like I've always said Stygian in my head, but that could totally be wrong. This is the word spelt out, so honestly, pronounce it however you want. Stygian. Honestly, I'm just gonna stick with Stygian, and if I pronounce it like 5 different ways for the remainder of this book, then I apologize in advance. You get what you get. So basically, Manon can only get spider silk from the Stygian spiders. These are not your normal spiders. These are spiders the size of horses with human level intelligence, and they can speak. Wow! If you didn't have arachnophobia before, these might give it to you. So anyways, we're gonna go on a little journey and for whatever reason hunt down the spiders. If you ask me, it's not really worth it. I have seen Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I already know how this ends, but we're gonna do it anyways. So we're going on this little journey and we're flying through a storm, and you know, we run into all the issues that come, I guess, when you're flying on a wyvern in a storm. Not really relevant to the plot, so we're just gonna glance over that. But she finally gets to where she believes they are, and it's because she sees the side of a mountain practically covered in spider webs. So as you can imagine, they're treading through these spider webs and they see all these little baby spiders that are all just like crawling around because they've found a haven underneath basically the mama spider. She's like the queen bee of spiders, I guess. Not saying she's a queen. I don't think politically she is a queen. I don't think they have like a political hierarchy like that. I could be remembering wrong. The Stygian spiders are going to be around for multiple books, so I would say it's definitely a creature to remember, unfortunately. So maybe if there is some sort of hierarchy, then we will learn of it. But as far as you're concerned, I think she's just like the queen bee of all the spiders on the side of this mountain. Don't look into it too deeply here. There are literally so many important small details in this section, and that's just not one of them. So Manon ends up finding this big spider, and there's a couple other like larger spiders who are there to like guard this Miss Spider that we are speaking to. They get really sassy with each other. We find out that witches and Stygian spiders don't really like each other. So there's some stuff there. They have some banter. So the spider asks what Manon wants, and Manon says she wants 10 yards of spider silk. But according to our little Miss Spider over here, men have sacrificed their lives for a single yard. So she's like, I don't think you realize what you're asking for. Manon is not deterred, however. Spider, I guess, starts asking questions about the wyverns, and Manon decides that it's not really secret. So she does tell her, she's like, oh, well, the king gave them to us so long as we fight in his war. And then the spider jumps to a different conversation entirely. If this conversation leads you with questions, it's because we're not really going to go into it more till later. So she switches conversations and she asks her about the curse. There has been a curse laid on the witches where basically their home, also known as the Wastes, is uninhabitable by the witches. And that's most all we're going to learn here, except for there is a Croatian witch. Remember, that's the one who is not an Iron Teeth witch, and they don't really get along, really, because of this curse. But there's only one Croatian who can undo it, and it's actually the Croatians who made the curse as well, I believe. So apparently, the spider asked, because she has some inside information, there was a shapeshifter, which in my opinion, if I could be one magical creature, I would be a shapeshifter. I think that is the coolest and most amazing thing ever. But anyways, there's this merchant who came to buy a yard of spider silk from her, and he was a shapeshifter. And he gave her an update basically about the status of the Wastes, and basically said that there's a mortal king who basically built a kingdom in the Wastes because he's not a witch, so it is habitable to him. But apparently some wine-haired girl, ominous, overtook him and took the kingdom. So now she's the queen of the Wastes. The Wastes curse has existed longer than Manon has been alive though, so she's never actually been there, but she knows basically the Iron Teeth witches' one goal in their life right now is to live in the Wastes again. So anyways, back to the whole like spider silk negotiation thing. Manon wants 10 yards. And the spider informs her, she's like, well, you know that shapeshifter merchant I just told you about? For literally 1 yard, he gave me 20 years of his life. But apparently, she didn't feel like taking 200 years of Manon's life would be worth it. So instead, she wants her face. Thankfully, not her actual like physical face, but she wants to steal her beauty because I guess when she took 20 years off the life of the shapeshifter, she got some of his abilities, so she wants to shift into a beautiful creature. And she can only do so much with the shapeshifting abilities because she didn't get that much with Manon's immortal beauty. And she's described, I think, I could be wrong, I think she's described as being like the most beautiful person in this whole series. Like, she's supposed to be unearthly beautiful. But there's actually another character that we'll meet not too far from now who also is described as being like insanely beautiful and like unnaturally beautiful. So I'm not going to compare the beauty of fictional characters, but let's just say she's supposed to be like jaw-droppingly, heart-stoppingly gorgeous. And Manon decides, you know what, I don't want to give up this face. I like this face, so I'm just gonna steal the spider silk. She basically asks the spider, she's like, why don't you show me this spider silk before I trade away my beauty? And the spider agrees, and I guess they're looking at the spider silk on the side of a cliff. This just feels a little bit like a way to shorten the scene and not make this last longer. But Manon's looking at the spider silk and she's like, this is low quality. I'm not gonna trade my beauty for this low quality spider silk. And this Stygian spider is like insulted and she starts getting all riled up. And then Abraxos just takes his tail and goes, yeets that girl off the side of the cliff. So then Manon grabs the spider silk, gets on Abraxos' back, and they fly away. And that's the end. Chapter 38, we're still in Manon's POV, but it's after they've like gotten the spider silk all set up to like fuse to Abraxos' wings, and it's actually helped a lot and made him a lot better of a flyer, so that's a good thing. So the 13 are there to practice flying in certain formations, and one of these formations is making the crossing, which I think is just, honestly, I don't know what it is. To me, it sounds like flying over the drop. I must say, this is something that just like never truly made sense to me, so I just am like, eh. As much as I love the witch chapters, obviously, and witch politics and Manon's whole story, I usually do kind of glaze over these parts because all you need to know is that it's some sort of flight formation slash flying exercise in which the Wyvern's wings have to be very strong in order to complete it, or the Wyvern and the witch will die. That's all that's really relevant to know. What the obstacle is, I've never fully understood it. It sounds like they're just gonna fly off a major drop-off, but then at the same time they make it sound more complicated than that. Guys, I'm just being honest with you. The 13 is like in front of this, like where they're gonna take off to do the crossing, which is this obstacle that they have to do. Abraxos starts acting like a scared little puppy and he's like refusing to actually make the crossing. And of course, like all the other clans are there to watch each other fly this formation. So even like Iskra and Petra are there to like witness Manon, who's supposed to be the strongest of them all, who is known to be favored to become the witch queen once this is all said and done. And here she is with a wyvern who can't do a simple flying formation. Everyone starts like goading her basically, and so she's like, forget this, put him in his pen. I don't even want to look at him right now. She's really mad about it because obviously it hurt her ego a little bit. She's really embarrassed. But then Iskra is like, I'll teach Abraxos a lesson. She grabs a whip and starts whipping Abraxos. I don't think you understand. The way she's dead. Manon whips around and makes her regret the day she was born in a very brutal and gory fight that goes on pretty much until Sorrel and Astrin rip Manon off of Iskra. It's honestly like so intense. Usually fight scenes aren't intense to me when I read them, but that one had me like, oh. So as Manon's being pulled away from Iskra's very bruised and cut up self, Manon looks at her and says, you touch him again and I'll drink the marrow from your bones. Also, justice has been served because Iskra's grandmother does pull her aside and has to give her as many whippings as Iskra gave to Abraxos in order to like make things even. So Manon feels a little good about that. The crazy thing is that Manon was actually offered to make the blows herself and she turned it down. So interesting. For someone who's supposed to be so brutal and heartless, interesting. Then later that night, Petra does come to see Manon when she is with Abraxos in his pen. Petra tells Manon that she knows that everyone in the 13, as well as their wyverns, is not eating the meat provided by the king's men. So Petra started also not doing that. She doesn't really mention anything about the rest of her clan, just herself. And then they have this weird ominous conversation where no one wants to admit or say anything. But they want to communicate stuff with each other, you know, those kind of ominous conversations about how basically something really sketchy that they are not privy to is going on. Also, this doesn't really play largely into the plot, but this is something interesting to me. Manon has always had a very emotional and intellectual connection with Abraxos. Often the other witches in her clan think that this is really odd and weird, and they're like, he doesn't understand you. Like, why do you try to communicate to him? And she's like, what do you mean? Like, Abraxos speaks to me. Like, we can communicate. And so she thinks it's weird that no one else is experiencing that. But then Petra reveals that she also can communicate with her wyvern. So Manon and Petra are the only two that we know that actually have like a relationship with their wyvern. I do think that's worth noting. Chapter 39, we have a Celaena and Rowan POV. Did it get really dark all of a sudden? So we actually find ourselves in a very interesting situation where Rowan has some tattoos that are like fading, and so he's trying to refill them in to redarken them, but there are some in spots that he can't reach. So he actually teaches Celaena how to do tattooing and has her fill in the spots in his back that he can't reach. So while they're doing that, Celaena decides, you know, while we're already nice and vulnerable with each other, let's ask each other really uncomfortable questions. She asks about his family. He basically reveals that his parents were mated and they had them late into their fae lives because having a child as a fae is very, very rare. But they actually died when he was 20 years old and he had no siblings, which is also very common in fae culture. So he asks about her family. And basically she said that due to her fae heritage, her mom almost died in childbirth because having fae children is very rare. So because of that, she stopped trying to have children after Aelin, which Aelin was kind of bummed that she had no siblings, but she was also totally fine with it because of her cousin Aedion, who was like a brother to her. Now that makes the potentially them marrying each other thing a little bit weirder because they consider each other like siblings, but that's besides the point. This is also where she reveals that she knows all about him and being a general in the king's army, and she actually did follow pretty closely with his career, I guess, as general, but she did end up like stop looking into it because it wasn't really doing great things for her mental health, and I don't blame her because she really does blame herself for what he has become. She realizes that if she had come forward to him sooner, he might not have ended up in the situation that he did. She's glad that she was able to get away to Wendelin before Aedion got there because he would have recognized her. Then Rowan asks a legit question. He's like, okay, when you see Aedion, do you think he will want to help you take back your throne, or do you think he'll want to kill you? Very valid. It could really go either way. Obviously, we know where Aedion's heart lies in all of this, and we know he wants nothing more than to get Aelin back and see her back on her throne despite everything that she's done and been through. But Aelin doesn't know that. Celaena basically says that she has no clue. Celaena then asks him about his cousins, in which Rowan comes back with like a really witty, honestly, I have too many and I can't stand them, but you'd probably get along with them. She also realizes that this is the first time she's ever been able to openly talk about her family and past in literally 10 years. And she's able to like speak openly and vulnerably about it. And that's kind of healing for her. Now, let's jump to the main issue here, and the reason why the first half of this book was really frustrating for me the first time I read it. Rowan asks her, give me one reason why you cannot take up your throne, because she wants to use her power to free Nehemia's people, but not her own. She does kind of venture off into this little soliloquy, but she pretty much ends it off by saying that her crown would just be another set of shackles. Obviously, Rowan hears another set, so he's like, what other shackles do you bear other than this crown? The shackles that she's referring to is actually not Endovir, which I originally thought when I first read this, but she's referring to Erebin Hommel. She feels tied to him in a lot of ways. And it's honestly like very psychologically messed up. She recognizes that although she hates him and wants him no longer alive, she also recognizes that she wouldn't be as powerful as she was today if it were not for him, and she'd also be dead. This kind of leaves Rowan with a lot more questions than answers. She decides that's enough vulnerability for the night. And then she does make like some sort of side comment about their friendship, and he gets all up in her business and he's like, I'll just remind you, we are not friends so long as I'm training you. But then he says, whatever we are and whatever this is. So you're saying there's something there. I mean, we were all feeling it, but the first time the characters admit it is like the best. And he says pretty much they should have room to figure it out on their own. You no longer have to guess. There is definitely something there between Rowan and Celaena. I refilled my coffee and brushed my hair, so I feel like I'm ready to continue. Chapter 40. Dorian is just living his best life with his boothing Sorsha. Anyway, so they're officially a thing now, as you remember from their lovely first kiss. Only issue is that they still have to keep things secret because he can't marry a lowborn, and unfortunately that's what she is. Out of the guilt of her having to go through this secret relationship in order to just be with him, he does ask her, he's like, what do you want? Like, what's your wish? I'll make your dreams come true. And her wish is that she doesn't have to live their life in secret. And that's kind of heartbreaking because that'll never happen. And Dorian is also hyper aware that that can never happen. My heart breaks just a little bit every single time I reread that chapter. Sorsha leaves, and shortly after Sorsha leaves, Chaol actually comes into Dorian's rooms to chat with him real quick. Chaol is there to apologize for really just going behind Dorian's back and quite literally everything. He sent Celaena away without talking to him. He knew Celaena was Aelin and didn't tell him. He was teaming up with Aedion on the side and didn't tell him. He knew everything about his dad. Basically everything that Chaol knows, he did not tell Dorian, and he's apologizing to Dorian, and Dorian's just like, you know what? Keep your apologies to yourself. I'm not ready to hear them. And here's the kind of crazy thing. Dorian asked the question we're all thinking up until this point, especially if this is your first time reading the book. You're probably like, what's going on with Chaol and Celaena? Because clearly Celaena is away and she's kind of starting something maybe with someone else. Like there's something there. Her and Chaol kind of left off in a rocky place, and I'm just gonna throw my hair in a ponytail because my hair is driving me insane right now. Let's just get this out of the way. Where was I? So Dorian decides to ask Chaol the question that we are all wondering. Does he still love Celaena now that he knows that she's Aelin, after everything that happened with Nehemia, now that he knows who she is, what she plans to do, all of that? Chaol, instead of saying yes or no, starts to list all the things about her that he loves or loved, and then starts to list all the things about her that he doesn't love, or that scares him, or that makes him uncomfortable. And this is why Dorian is probably one of my all-time favorite characters in the Sarah J. Maas world. He just says, you cannot pick and choose which parts of her you love, just like you cannot pick and choose which parts of me you accept. Dorian is so real for that, and I love it. Now we're gonna jump to Aedion's POV. He is with Chaol, Murtaugh, and Ren, and they're all in Aelin's old apartment. And Murtaugh has just gotten back from Skull's Bay. Everything I'm about to tell you here is a lot of foreshadowing. If you were like me and the first time you read over this, you just kind of skimmed over it, now is the chance. I'm just gonna summarize the main bullet points for you. So first thing he asks is if Aedion knows who General Narok is. So basically, he found out that Captain Ralph has taken back Skull's Bay and is now the Pirate King. If you're confused at all, we now have pirates as part of this story, which is so funny considering how many mystical creatures there are, and then all of a sudden there's pirates. Captain Ralph is a pirate, and we will actually learn a lot about him in Assassin's Blade, which is actually the next book I'll be covering, so subscribe if you want to stay tuned for my Assassin's Blade breakdown. But Captain Ralph apparently has taken back Skull's Bay, which is a group of islands, and is now the Pirate King. He has declared himself the Pirate King. Very cool. And General Narok and his fleet were pushed to the Eastern Islands, also known as the Dead Islands. So this general, who serves the King of Outerlyn, was pushed out of Skulls Bay by pirate Captain Ralph, and now he's at these dead islands. And basically there's been reports of shrieking heard from the distance on these eastern islands, or the dead islands, and no one besides the king's men has been able to go there and come back. And some men have gotten close enough that they saw a freaky and inhuman creature on the rocks of the island, and then proceeds to say this was nothing from legend, it was made. It wore a black collar like a pet. Remember that. So Narok took his fleet and his freakish creatures, and they decided to go to Wendelin. Why do you think they went to Wendelin? Because they're gonna launch an attack immediately following the King's Champion's assassination of the Wendelin royal family. Except we know that weeks ago, Selena decided not to kill the Wendelin royal family, and that she is now at Mistward training to use her fairy magic. So that's really gonna complicate things when they're waiting for the chaos to ensue of that attack and nothing happens. That's literally where this whole book started. This is also a moment where Adian is like almost kind of shocked that he doesn't feel bad for Wendelin, but then he realized it does kind of make sense, because technically Wendelin is run by the Ash River family. That's like the royal bloodline, are the Ash Rivers. Aelin is actually, her like full royal title is Aelin Ash River Galathinius. Adian is also very closely related to the Ash River family, and you would think that he would feel bad about this, but it occurs to him he doesn't really feel bad because they didn't come to help or aid Terrasen when Adarlan took over. So he's just kind of like,
sorry, long distance cousin. I hope things work out for you and you don't die.
Okay, and then on another note entirely, they're all discussing like what this could possibly mean, what are the potential fallouts of this. They're also wondering if Aelin's gonna kill the Ash Rivers. Like, they don't know that she's in Mistward right now training to become Fae. They think that she might still be trying to go through with this assassination plan. Anyway, so as we're discussing this, Adian comes to a moment where he's like, hold on. Hale is not fighting for Aelin to take over the throne of Terrasen and bring Terrasen back, but he's also not fighting for the King of Adarlan. So like, who is he fighting for? Like, is he fighting for good in general, or is he fighting for Dorian specifically? And does that make him a traitor or a rebel? And he confronts Kale on all of this. Kale's like, neither. I'm neither of those. I'm not a rebel or a traitor. And they're like, okay, great, that's fine, but like, what are you then? Because they're kind of at this point where it's like, if you're gonna try to get in the way of Aelin bringing Terrasen back to its former glory, then we might not want you around us much longer to hear our plans. Is mommy so boring? Do you want to say hello? You are so beautiful, baby girl. Are you the most beautifulest baby girl ever? Basically, Kale comes to the conclusion in this point, he's like, you know what? I'm loyal to Dorian, and if Dorian's gonna fight for Aelin to take back her throne, then that's what I'm gonna fight for. If not, then I won't. So it's just kind of like, he's just gonna choose whatever Dorian chooses. Like, he's not even gonna think for himself. And Adian actually, he just calls it out. He's like, I don't actually think that's honorable. Like, you think that's you being loyal and that's the honorable thing? He's like, I don't think that is. I think that's just you not wanting to make a decision and holding on to a delusion. And I guess to prove a point, Kale decides that he's going to prove how honorable he is and keep his promise to his father. So he goes to the king and tells him that he's retiring and he's going back to Aniel. Chapter 41, we're back in Selena's POV. Basically, in the morning, she's a scullery maid. In the afternoons and the evening, she's training with Rowan. And then in the evenings, her and Rowan are now sharing stories with each other. So they still do kind of go to Emerus and Luca's stories by the hearth nights every once in a while, but they're starting to have like their own private story time together. Rowan's lived for hundreds of years and he's a very renowned Fae warrior, so he does have a lot of really nice stories. Aelin just enjoys sitting around and listening to him talk about his past. Also, hearing these stories are making her grow to hate Maeve more and more. Not that great. I won't tell you why that's important, but it is. On another note, Beltane is coming up, which is apparently like a holiday. Honestly, based off its description, it's pretty much a spring solstice kind of thing, or maybe it's more of a summer solstice. But basically there's lots of bonfires and flowers everywhere and everyone just has a good time. So Selena and Rowan are going to check things out at like these festivities together, And he informs her that she's actually going to be training tonight instead of enjoying the party, which, okay. But there's a bunch of bonfires everywhere, right? So he tells her that he wants her to like empower the flames and keep them at like a certain level of flame for as long as she possibly can. But she's continuing to do this throughout the night, but then something interesting happens. Obviously, she's getting drained throughout the night, and she starts to get more and more stressed as the festivities get more and more busy, because if she makes a mistake and one of those bonfires like loses control, she could really hurt someone. She decides to like really focus in on her magic. There's something about the music playing at the festivities, and she just like decides to listen to the music to let it calm her, but it ends up, I think, making her like lose focus, and so she gets in this weird trance, but she's like entranced by her magic, and she almost comes possessed by it. So Rowan obviously sees this, and he sees that something's up, and he tries to break her from this trance and get her to stop using her magic, and he tells her that she went to the bottom of her well. Remember the whole like battery analogy? Basically, she drained her battery, and you can die if you do that. So he snaps her out of it, and she basically collapses to the ground. And the crazy thing is that instead of now externally controlling fire, there is now a fire going on literally under her skin, like in her body. Like she's burning herself from the inside out, except for her power is fire, so it's not gonna like hurt her, but she is very, very hot and she's burning up. Think of it as like some supernatural insane fever. Rowan grabs some healers who are nearby, who apparently also came to the festivities, and they're right outside of Mistward. So they run her up to his rooms because he has like this big tub in his room, and he drops her in the tub, and literally the water starts boiling. Like that's how hot her body temperature is, that the water they set her in starts boiling. So thankfully Rowan has the power of wind, so he's like trying to cool down the water, and there's this whole thing where the water freezes and then it melts and boils and then freezes and then melts and boils a little less aggressively, and they kind of go back and forth until eventually the water's just lukewarm. After sitting in the lukewarm water for a little bit, it does actually like lower her body temperature, so she is good, but Rowan commands her to not touch her magic like again for the next couple days, because she like almost burnt out and her magic source is going to be really depleted for the next couple days. Rowan goes out to like speak to one of the healers about what needs to happen, and the other healer stays with her and helps her, because they threw her in the tub with her clothes on because it was kind of a life or death situation. So the healer helps her get out of like her other clothes to change into like some clean clothes, and Rowan comes back in and he sees all of these scars on her back. Now remember, she has these 3 giant scars on her back from when she was a slave in Endovir. This is where we get the "who did this to you" trope. And then she basically tells him, she was like, I was a slave at Endovir for a year. And then he just walks out, does not say a word. Chapter 42, we are in Rowan's POV, and he is in his hawk form, flying back to Dornael and absolutely seething. Obviously, he's a warrior and he's seen an unthinkable amount of brutal injuries in his lifetime, and he has seen some worse than Selena's. Like, he's not saying hers is the worst he's ever seen. What he is saying is that this is the most he's ever been affected by seeing someone else's injuries. Not to romanticize an intense moment, but sounds to me like he cares. This is also where he realized that Maeve lied to him. She left out that part of her story and basically just made her seem like the princess who decided to, instead of being a princess, play assassin and then work for the king. Maeve never mentioned anything about a slave camp, which obviously we know is a big part of Selena's story, and that's the only reason she ever even considered serving the king in the first place, was to get free of the slave camp. So it's not like she's just serving the king because she wants to. So obviously now we know why Rowan hated Selena so much. He was missing a huge chunk of the story. So we're gonna jump to Selena's POV, lying in Rowan's bed, unable to move basically because of her magic being so depleted, when he does come back. So he stopped himself from going to Dornael because he realized if he confronted Maeve, Maeve would tell him he's never allowed to see her again or go back to Mistward and train her anymore. And because of the blood oath, he wouldn't be able to come back to see Aelin. But that's just another hint for you about what all encompasses a blood oath. Basically, if you are in a blood oath to someone their will is your will, basically. Rowan comes back and he basically tells Celaena that he would prefer her to stay with him in his rooms on a cot, of course. Such a funny addition that Sarah J. Maas made. And then he apologizes and said that he would not have said or done or treated her certain ways if he had known her past. And she, in her own way, accepts the apology. And then he asks for her story. And this is 110% why I suggest reading Assassin's Blade either right before this book or right after this book. Because literally this scene right here is her telling him the story of Assassin's Blade. So the book Assassin's Blade is what she tells him in this moment. And that's the book we're reading next, so it works out perfectly. Chapter 43, we are still in Rowan and Celaena's POV, and Rowan is fussing over Celaena, and it's low-key kind of cute, so we just let it happen. He's basically not letting her leave the bed, he's making sure she's getting all of her nutrients and eating all of her meals, and basically trying to help her heal as quickly as possible. So because of that, they do actually sit down and have a lot of really good conversations, and I do want to highlight just a couple. First of all, they talk a little bit more about burnout, and she asks if her only two options if she ever gets to that point again is to either stop using her magic or to just burn out and die. And he said technically yes, but there's also a third option that only some people have, and that is Karanam. Some people say Karanam, I say Karanam, to each their own. So Rowan explains that if a fae is close to burnout and they have a Karanam, which is another fae, that fae, known as their Karanam, can empower their magic. There has to be a better way to describe that. So it's like for me, if I'm using my phone all day and my battery is at like 1% and it's about to hit 0 and someone just like gives me 25% battery. So like that would be my Karanam giving me that battery, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. So you can't just be anyone's Karanam. It has to be like your magic is compatible, and the only way to really tell if your magic is compatible or not is to try and either succeed or fail. And if you fail, you would both burn out or you would both like lose your minds. Like I think they say like your mind shatters. So it's risky to try. Then we're gonna change topics to his cadre, another word that I'm sure I'm saying wrong and some people are going to disagree with me on, and I will not fight them on it. But this is the other men who serve Maeve with Rowan. So think Gabriel, the guy who we met who Rowan was tattooing, he's a part of the cadre. But surprisingly, Rowan switches the conversation really fast, so he doesn't really want to talk about them, and he asks her more about her time in Endovier. She tells him a little bit more, but then he brings up specifically her scars. So healers can actually remove scars and heal scars. So he's curious why she hasn't healed them. She basically just says that they serve as reminders to her to free the slaves of Endovier. So once she's done that, she'll think about it. But for now, like, the scars serve as a reminder of what she vowed to do. So days go by, and it's actually Celaena's 19th birthday, and nothing says happy birthday like another dead body that they need to investigate, as well as the chocolates that Rowan gets her. So there you go. You get some, you lose some. And then after she shoves down a couple chocolates, he says, you know what? I think it's about time for you to start training again. You seem like you've healed from your burnout. Let's go. So they head out to a field, and he basically says, okay, so we know you can use fire for long periods of time. You've gotten really good at controlling flames. But he said, let's try to make something out of flames. So he says like a sword or a dagger or even a shield. Just try to create something using your fire. Sure enough, it's not really going well, and she gets really tired really fast, and she's like, oh, I think I'm burning out again. And then he realizes in this moment what Celaena is doing or has been doing and calls her out on it. Celaena only burnt out because she lost control of her magic, and she was focusing more on the music than her actual magic, and she got in a trance by it. That was not actually the full extent of her power. If anything, her power definitely goes much deeper than that. Rowan is now realizing though that she was relieved when she thought that her magic might be insignificant, because, to quote Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, and she knows that if she has this crazy epic fae power that is extremely advanced and hard to match, then people are going to have really high expectations for her, and she's gonna have a target on her back, more so than she already does as Aelin Ashriver Galathinius. So she knows he's right, and she hates that he's right, but she basically admits that that's kind of what's going on there. He basically says, okay, well, with that in mind, actually tap into your magic and stop trying to pretend like you are less powerful than you are. And sure enough, by the end of their training session, she is conjuring shields of fire to the point where he's like throwing ice daggers at her. What a lovely romantic date night. He's just throwing these ice daggers at her, but because of her fire shield, she's not getting hit by any of them. So, big win for Celaena. Later that night, though, Celaena slips out of Rowan's rooms while he's sleeping, sneaks her way down to the training field, and starts to practice her magic. This chapter, although it is shorter, to me, is such a big deal because this is truly the first moment where we see Aelin not hate her magic, but actually, like, she's learning to love it. She actually wants to control it. She wants to tap into it. She wants to get better at it. So this is kind of where we start to see that healing and that transition for her. Chapter 44. So the 13 are training, and Abraxos has still not made this crossing. They're training in every other formation, but the crossing is just something that Abraxos will not do. Sure enough, a little bit into practicing their formations, Manon gets summoned by her grandmother. How do I say this in a way without getting demonetized? Her grandmother puts her through it physically and emotionally, if you are catching my drift. And frankly, the grandmother is the worst. But she's doing this to Manon to remind her that she is a heartless being. So if her wyvern has to die in order to try to prove itself, then Abraxos has to die. And that makes me very mad, and it gives me a couple more reasons to hate the grandmother. On another note entirely, we find out that Iskra somehow, someway found a Crocian witch spying on the Iron Teeth witches in the mountains, and she's apparently been like under the mountain. They're trying to pull information out of her, if you also pick up my drift there. I don't want to say words that are going to get me demonetized or in trouble, so guys, I'm doing my best. Please fill in the blanks so I don't get in trouble. Anyway, so we're going to flash forward to later that day. The Blackbeak grandmother has literally summoned all of the Iron Teeth witches to where the crossing takes place, and basically tells Manon, okay, you and Abraxos are going to make this right now in front of everyone, and if Abraxos dies, he dies, and if you die with him because he fails, that's also highly unfortunate, and it's what you get for picking the weakest wyvern. So that's fun. So Manon hops onto Abraxos' saddle, and she's kind of accepting the fact that she might fall to her death here because Abraxos has not even indicated that he can make a flight like this work or do this kind of formation or whatever in the world the crossing is. I don't even know. If you know what the crossing is and you want to put it in the comments, please tell me, because I feel like this would be a lot more epic to me if I actually understood the complexities going on here. But she tells Abraxos right before they attempt the crossing, from now until the darkness cleaves us apart, you are mine and I am yours. Now let's show them why. And somehow we drag it out for a page or two, but Manon and Abraxos do, in a very dramatic and epic way, make the crossing, and they do it successfully. So, big yay. Chapter 45, we are in Rowan's POV because he's talking to the Centennials, or the guards, and basically asking how long has Celaena been secretly practicing, and they reveal that it's actually been days. For goodness sakes, he has supernatural hearing, so of course he heard her sneaking out, but he always just assumed that she was going to like kitchen duties or something. But then all of a sudden yesterday he noticed that she was really stepping up her game in training. So he was like, something's going on. So he kind of figured it out. So he's spying on her and watching her train, and he realizes that she has found a way to effortlessly weave together her really strong and powerful fire magic with her assassin training. So she's like kind of doing this cross between hand-on-hand combat and fire magic combat. Apparently, it sounds pretty cool. That's one thing I'm really excited to see whenever these become movies or a TV show. That is a scene I am very excited to see. So he reveals himself, and Celaena's now aware that he knows, so she's not going to be secretive about it anymore. If anything, she really just starts to step it up in training, and she is improving at a very impressive rate. So one of these days they're training, and then they go to investigate the supernatural murder case. And they realize that maybe this creature is hunting demi-fae specifically in order to get Rowan and Celaena's attention. Also, this is the first time they entertain the idea that maybe there's more than one of these creatures or people that are killing the demi-fae. Sure enough, they're inspecting this body and they realize that something different about this demi-fae is that it actually fought back. The other ones were just kind of paralyzed, but you can tell that there was a struggle. That being said, they noticed there was something under his nails, and when she scraped it out with a knife, she smelt it, and she realized that it smelt not only just horrendous, but also familiar. It smelt and looked just like the blood of the creature that was living under the library in the King of Adarlan's castle. Do you remember there was that really freakish creature, and she went into the tunnels and there were 100 cages right before going to the clock tower? Yeah, that creature. And she realizes that this is like the same blood. And so she tells Rowan all about that creature, everything she knows about the creature, how her and Dorian trapped it basically with word marks. They decide that they can't really keep delaying this, especially if these creatures are really just hunting down demi-fae, and they're so close to Mistward, which is literally full of demi-fae. So they decide that it's time, once and for all, that they find this creature. So they go hunting, and they find nothing, so they decide to make camp for the night. On a side note entirely, I don't know why she's thinking about this right now, but she keeps finding herself thinking about Kale, and can't really decide if she misses him or she needs to let him go. And she also realizes that now that she's really like embraced her magic and she's starting to embrace who she really is, they will never have a relationship. And then something even more painful for her to accept kind of hits her, and she asks Rowan, she's like, is it possible to like want to hurt your mate? And he says, no, like you'd rather hurt yourself before you hurt your mate. Like it's not really possible. And she realizes that as a fae creature, she has a mate out there somewhere, and her mate is not Kale. Otherwise, she would not have tried to kill Kale after what happened with Nehemia. So she realizes that maybe it is for the best to let him go, even if she still cares about him. Chapter 46, we're still in Rowan and Celaena's POV as they are camping for the night, trying to hunt down these creatures. And they're basically going through the woods, and they get to the part, and I'm like totally blanking on what the word is, but the border of Wendelin is along water, and so they get to like the coast, I guess, of Wendelin, and they see Adarlan ships, aka General Narok. Remember the guy, the Pirate King pushed him to the Dead Islands and there were all these freaky creatures and shrieking and then they disappeared? Yeah, that guy. They went to Wendelin to cause problems so that after Celaena makes the assassination, they can attack Wendelin. Yeah, those people. They're not only there and the ships are along the coast, but apparently a bunch of the men, as well as some of these creatures, are basically hiding in caves along the coast. So they're like smuggling in all these creatures. But here's what's crazy. Rowan goes in to like investigate and like spy. So he like secretly in his hawk form like goes up, and Celaena stays back and waits for him. And he comes back and basically says these are well-trained soldiers and there are so many of these creatures, but they're more civilized than the one that Celaena described as being under the library. And don't think civilized as like proper gentlemen. Think of it more as like more human seeming. Like they're definitely still supernatural creatures and there's definitely something really freaky about them. They're acting more like beings, like they're more intelligible and they just look less creature-esque. Also, Rowan finds out that they are taking these demi-fae and they're actually turning them into the creatures. So the creatures that we've been seeing are actually demi-fae that have been turned into these creatures. So the ones that we've been finding dead are the ones who are not compatible or are not able to become creatures. Rowan basically knows this because when he went further back, he found that there was a demi-fae there who was actively being turned into a creature and basically said it was very ugly and it wasn't pretty, and he tried to mercy her, but wasn't able to without getting caught, unfortunately, and he needed to get back to Celaena to give her this information because they need to get this information back to Mistward and also report it to Wendelin, so that information could not die with him. So unfortunately, he did have to leave that demi-fae girl behind, and this is very hard for Celaena as well, who wants to just charge in there and rescue this fae girl, but he just tells her, like, this is not a good idea. Also, all of these men are absolutely armed to the teeth with iron, so they are prepared for fae attacks. So just the two of them are not gonna cut it. He also shares with Celaena that General Narok is actually one of these creatures. Like, he's not a human being. Like, he is one of these black-blooded, horrendous smelling creatures. So they start to go back to Mistward to warn the others, but then they hear something in the woods and they realize there are creatures that are following them. They're able to hide from it, but one of them gets just close enough to Celaena that she's able to, like, steal a look and basically confirms that these are definitely far more civilized than what she saw under the library, but they have the same claws. It seems to be like a very intelligent being, and then on top of that, it is wearing a black collar. Chapter 47. This thing gets close enough to Celaena that it actually goes and attacks her, but not in the way that you would think. It actually attacks her in a psychological way. And we realize that the thing that she fought in the cemetery back in, I think, part 2 or the end of part 1, that thing, it was one of these creatures. Rowan somehow pieces together that the only way to make her snap out of it and for them to run away is to cause pain, so he bites her neck again. I don't know. What is up with Sarah J. Maas and having these men bite women's necks? I don't know. I'm not going to look into that too deeply. So they run away deeper into the mountains now because these creatures are now following them, and they do not want to lead these creatures to Mistward before they have a chance to warn the demi-fae of Mistward and also try to get some help. So Celaena has this brilliant yet terrifying idea, and she says, you distract them. She runs up into the mountains in her fae form, and she lights a fire. And what do we know? Who is attracted to fire in the woods? The skinwalkers. 5 of them show up, and they're like, oh, we're gonna kill you, because they know that she is the reason, like, some of their family members are no longer with us. So they start to chase her, and she guides them straight to the 3 creatures that had followed her and Rowan in the woods. Sure enough, these skinwalkers go and attack these 3 creatures, and then her and Rowan book it back to Mistward. Chapter 48, Rowan and Celaena immediately warn everyone at Mistward, and they also send word to Wendelin asking for help and support. Because although the demi-fae could technically hold off the humans, they definitely cannot hold off those creatures. Keep in mind, these people are there in order to train and tap into their fae magic. So these are not super trained people. These are actually people who are struggling to tap into their faeness. So the fact that there's going to be an attack there, this is quite possibly one of the worst demographics to get attacked other than just plain humans. So they try to send some of the people who are unable to fight to a nearby village to seek refuge, but everyone is determined to stay there and fight. So they start making battle plans, and pretty much the only plan that they have is to slow down the attack on Mistward as much as they can before help can come. In all honesty, they know they won't make it without help. So Celaena asks, like, oh, why don't you call on your cadre? Like, these are some serious fae warriors. And Rowan just says, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Maeve won't let them come. Like, realistically, she would not let them come. And we all have sworn a blood oath to Maeve. And Selena's annoyed with him because it's like he's not even trying. She's upset and she storms off. And then while she's away, Rowan is talking to Emerson Luca, I believe. You can tell they just got some news. And so Selene is like, do I want to know or don't I? And Rowan just kind of takes her to the side and gives her the news. Do you remember at the very beginning of this book, or maybe it was the end of the last one, where after the death of Nehemia, there was a slave girl who started an uprising in Calcola, which is the only slave camp that's worse than Endovir. Rowan just got news and shared it with Celaena. When the king got wind of this uprising, he sent 2 legions of his men to kill every single slave in Calcola, which was thousands of Eelway people. And then even though no one in Endovir started an uprising, he decided just to be safe and so that it wouldn't get to their heads, he also had 2 legions sent to Endovir to kill all the slaves there as well. And considering the fact that those were the 2 groups of people that Celaena wanted to save, it's like losing Nehemia all over again for her. So she just goes out to the outdoors near the woods by the wards and she just releases wildfire. Chapter 49, we are going to jump to Chaol's POV because frankly, he's starting to give up. Aedion doesn't trust him. Dorian isn't talking to him. He's like, what am I even fighting for at this point anymore? And he's dealing with this internal struggle conveniently in the feast hall or the dining hall, wherever everyone in the royal family and the guard eats. And the king is there and he tells everyone that there's cause for celebration. He basically tells them about how he purged all of the horrible slaves and that there's nothing to worry about anymore, and he saved them all from the inconvenience of the uprisings from these 2 slave camps, even though one of them didn't even have an uprising in the first place. And then basically says how it is inconvenient that they're going to have to replenish the mines, aka find more innocent people to consider slaves and force them to work the mines. And then says that this is a good thing as well because he hasn't heard any more murmurings about the rebels since, and he thinks he's squashed any sort of resistance. We're gonna jump to Dorian's POV because this is kind of his breaking point with his father. Like, he knew his dad was a bad guy. He knew he was even borderline evil and that he was doing some corrupt things. But this is kind of the moment where he decides that it might be better off if his father was not alive. That's kind of where he's at now. And a big part of that is definitely the fact that Sorsha technically is one of these demographics that his father has targeted in the past. And so he finds her after this feast and he pulls her aside and he says, I need you to leave. She, of course, refuses to leave unless he comes with her, and he knows that as much as he does want to leave with her, it's either his dad is king, or if he leaves, then his little brother would become king. And his little brother is just as bad, if not worse, than his father. So he needs to stay for the sake of the kingdom. And she decides, if you stay, I stay. We're going to jump back to Chaol's POV because he's going to go down to the tunnels, basically, that stem from Celaena's rooms to go mourn all of the slaves. Because if you think about it, he cannot safely mourn those slaves out in public, or he could be killed for that. And he finds Aedion there too. And Aedion has really also hit his breaking point. And this is also one of those moments where the king made this decision in order to squash a rebellion, but in reality, he probably just empowered it. Later that night, in no POV in particular, we see, honestly, something that to me just goes to show Sarah J. Maas's artistry, and I feel like she really sets what the culture in Adarlan is like, because we're always in the castle and we don't really get to see the people and what's going on with the people outside of maybe a couple rebels here and there like Ren and Murtaugh. But later that night, the royal family appears at a theater and it's like a symphony that's going to be playing that night. And when the curtains rise, everyone in the symphony is wearing mourning black, including the conductor. And he proceeds to conduct them through a series of what I guess we would consider today as the national anthems of every single one of the kingdoms that the King of Adarlan has conquered. Surprisingly, just like that one singer and the harpist and violinist, that one day he lets them play their whole thing, he lets them make their statement, but the curtain closes, and by the next day the theater is shut down and no one ever saw the conductor or any member of that symphony ever again. Chapter 50, and the last chapter that we're going to be covering today, because first of all, I just need an emotional break, and also this is kind of the last chapter before the rest of the book really takes off. It's Celaena and Rowan's POV. He patiently waits for her to release her wildfire, and then she comes back to him, where he has unfortunately more bad news to deliver, and that's that Wendelin will not be sending any support to Mistward. But they basically appreciate the tip that the men of Adarlan are on Wendelin's continent, and they'll handle it if they push more towards the castle, which to me just irks me. Celaena's not even surprised because she's like, well, they didn't come to aid to Terrasen 10 years ago. Then Rowan tells her, you have my approval to go to Maeve. If you remember at the very beginning of this book, Maeve said that she had to go to Mistward with Rowan and stay there until Rowan said she was ready to go, and then Maeve would answer all of her questions about the word marks and the word keys. This is Rowan basically giving Celaena an out to get what she needs from Maeve and leave the continent before everything goes down, because she might not make it out of this alive. Celaena says absolutely not. She is not going to leave, and she is going to stay there with Rowan, because realistically, without her and Rowan, no one there is really standing a chance. And Rowan says that he will stay with her to whatever end. And even if you've never read past this chapter in the series before, you've probably seen that all over Throne of Glass TikTok. To whatever end is kind of like the always of Throne of Glass. You know how like always is like the word for Harry Potter? To whatever end is like the thing for Throne of Glass. So there's a little TikTok tip for you there. So they go to finalize their battle plans and then head to bed for the night. And as they're saying goodnight, Rowan calls her Fireheart. And as we talked about in an earlier part, that is what Celaena's mother used to call her when she was Aelin. And that name is very nostalgic to her. And she hasn't heard anyone call her Fireheart since her mother died. So it was like very special to her. And she just looks towards him and she says, you know, I don't care what you say. I claim you as my friend. And there's like a moment where he definitely likes the sound of that, but he just says, even if we make it out of this and we go to Maeve and you get all the answers you need from Maeve, I can't leave with you. He's basically a slave to Maeve so long as he's committed a blood oath to her. But he does tell her that despite his better judgment, he did reach out to all of the cadre. He doesn't know where they all are, but he did tell them basically the situation, and he did ask them to come help. He at least did that for her. But unfortunately, we're getting to the end of Celaena and Rowan's ability to be friends. They had to sleep for the night, but Celaena only gets a couple hours of sleep before Rowan wakes her up and lets her know that it's time to gear up. Chapter 51. If you remember, we ended off chapter 50 and part 3 with Rowan waking up Celaena saying, hey, time to suit up. Suit up. What is this, a Marvel movie? He says it's time to gear up. This actually comes as a surprise because they were not expecting Narok and his men to come this soon. Apparently, they've been betrayed. Someone told them where all of the traps and warning bells were, and so they were able to take care of them. And now they only have 1 hour before General Narok and his men are at the word stones, which are basically putting up that like magic protective shield over Mistward. So these word stones will continue to work as like a protective magical barrier, but they are gonna fall eventually. They're not like perfect. And that's when the Demi-Fae are basically gonna have to fight for their lives, is when those gates come down. So if you remember in the last part, when Celaena led those skinwalkers to the creature, she genuinely believed that one of them had died, but they're all back. They're all there, they're all fine, as if nothing happened, frankly. So this is a little disconcerting because they're like, okay, if a skinwalker couldn't kill this thing, like what will? Also guys, I guess I'm just gonna stop real quick and say, if really dark topics just really bother you, especially surrounding death and like death of loved ones, this might just not be the book series for you. Because in my opinion, in this book, it really starts up, but it just gets worse and worse book to book. If this part of this book is hard for you to stomach, you're not gonna be able to stomach the rest of the series. So I do want to throw out that disclaimer right now. But I'm gonna try to keep it fun, light, and bubbly for you because these are book series. These are not real people. These are not real battles. So I'm gonna stay sensitive to the sensitive topics, but we're gonna try to keep it light, bubbly, fun, and fast-paced. Anyway, so Narok and his men are coming, and they're just kind of like, where are all the soldiers that we saw in the caves? They decide they're gonna worry about that later because there's like this cloud of darkness. It's literally just called the darkness, and basically anything it touches just shrivels up and dies. And it starts like lashing out at these word stones. Somehow Rowan and Aelin, although they're not really familiar with this darkness power, they know that only a couple strikes and this thing's going to be breaking down the barrier. Like, this is something unlike they've ever seen before. Then they start hearing shouts from inside of Mistward, and it's basically been confirmed that they were betrayed by someone else because there are quite literally all those soldiers that we were wondering where they were a couple minutes ago, they are coming into Mistwood through the underground secret tunnels. Then Aelin has a fantastic idea. What destroys darkness better than light and fire? So she decides that she is going to go out and single-handedly stop the darkness herself from breaking into the Wordstone barrier. Only issue is that she actually has to go beyond the barrier in order to attempt to make this work. Chapter 52. Within quite literal seconds of her passing this barrier, the darkness and these three creatures are waiting for her. Also, General Narok is there as well, I believe, but he's more like observing from a distance, I believe. She notices off the bat as she starts fighting with these three creatures in that like mix of her assassin hand-to-hand combat and her fire that we talked about in the last part. She pulls out her sword, which is the sword from the cave that she got, I believe, in part 2. And one of them literally looks at the sword and calls it Goldrin. It's important, remember that. And then they said she is no Brandon of the Wildfire, which we also know is her ancestor. And then it hits her. These creatures are the Valg. Do you remember Gavin and Elena? What they were famous for is fighting the Valg. Brandon of the Wildfire was a renowned king who helped fight and defeat the Valg. Dark King Erewhon of the Valg, like those Valg. Those creatures. The things that witches are half, they're half fae, half Valg, so these creatures are Valg in their pure form. And then one of the creatures confirms not only are they Valg, they are Valg princes. And yes, believe it or not, there is a hierarchy within the Valg. And she just says, you know what, you've been beaten once, you can be beat again. And they just all start laughing and they're like, we were never beaten. We were only contained. That's not the legend that we heard. And then they make some comment about how like some dumb mortal man released them from where they were contained. So she's fighting them for a while, and by a while I mean like a very long time, and she realizes her magic is burning out. Apparently she hasn't been saving up her power for battle that night. She was saving up her power for battle in like maybe a couple days. Then on top of that, when she got the bad news about the slaughtering of all the slaves, she released a ton of fire. So she did lose like a big chunk of her magic in that moment, and she never fully replenished from that. My throat is so gross. So she's fighting for her life, realizing she's burning out, and then she sees some movement, and she sees 5 animals that are actually fae in their animal forms, and they all switch into their fae male form. And she realized that this is Rowan's cadre because one of them is Gavriel, who we obviously met earlier in the book. And she basically shouts out to them that Rowan is in Mistwood, so they run inside to go like assist him and help him. But they leave Aelin there to like burn out with her magic. Like even Gavriel was like, it's pretty obvious that she's burning out, but they're like, you know what, she's making a sacrifice, let's go help Rowan, that's who we're really here for. Then we're gonna jump to Rowan's POV as he's fighting all the soldiers coming in through those tunnels in Mistwood. He sees that his cadre's there to help, even Lorcan. Now that is a very big deal. Lorcan, of all of them, was the least likely to answer a call to aid. We will get to know him shortly. We're gonna get to know all the cadre really well in the upcoming books, so I'm not gonna go through and like explain each and every one of them right now, but they're all there. But thankfully, Gavriel, the mountain cat guy, he basically turns to Rowan and says, hey, she needs your help like right now. Rowan runs out and he sees that Aelin is about to burn out, and then he watches her get swallowed by the darkness. Chapter 53, Aelin's POV. Apparently she can feel the princes feeding off of her misery, and they're making her relive every single traumatic experience that she has ever had. It's like her life flashing before her eyes, but she's reliving it. And then there's like this crazy thing where she's reliving getting whipped in Endovier when she was a slave there, but instead of the slavers whipping her, it is every single person in her life that she believes that she has let down. Even people like Nehemia. She in this moment believes that she's dead and this is actually hell, and this is what the rest of her eternity is gonna look like. It's a very, very dark chapter. Chapter 54. Aelin and Aedian POV, but 10 years earlier. So the King of Adarlan and his son Dorian are visiting Terrasen, and young Aelin and Aedian are excited that other royals are going to be there, but at the same time they're kind of annoyed because they have to get dressed up really nice and be on their best behavior. Lady Marian is getting them both ready, and her daughter Alide is with her. Remember I told you Alide was important? This is that Alide. Alide's body was never found. We do not know what happened to Alide. This is the last time she was ever seen. So even as a child, Aelin actually totally hates the King of Adarlan. It's really funny. So they're all sitting down at this royal dinner and everyone's there together, and she's like, this man has too much pride. He's disrespectful to my parents. She also didn't like how he treated his son Dorian. And she also is hyper aware the entire time that she feels like the King of Adarlan, although he's supposedly there to talk to her parents, he's like staring her down at the end of the table. There's actually this really cute and sad moment where young Aelin turns to young Dorian and says, we should be friends. And he says, I already have a best friend and he's gonna be the fiercest warrior in all of Adarlan. It's Chaol. It's little Chaol. I love this part of the book. I mean, I hate it because it's really dark and sad, but there's like these tiny little sweet moments here and there, and that's one of them. I also think it's really funny that Aedion ends up actually being the fiercest warrior in Adarlan, so that's kind of funny but not funny at the same time. So during this very important dinner where it's been very stressed that Aelin and Aedion be on their best behavior, am I losing my voice? Aelin actually starts to lose control of her magic. So she's able to contain the magic for a little bit, but it's manifesting as like a fever and a piercing headache. And she describes it as what feels like a worm of darkness trying to work its way into her mind. So she like goes up to her mother and they start to have like some healers escort her away, but then in her time fighting this worm of darkness trying to work its way into her brain, she releases a bunch of blue fire. So unfortunately, her mom's power is water, and in this really sad, dramatic moment, her mother has to like drown her out in order to rescue everyone from her fire, and the mom feels horrible about it. And Aelin obviously is very embarrassed and she feels like she let her parents down, and then as she's being escorted away, all she remembers is seeing the King of Adarlan smiling at her. Obviously now she knows, looking back, that the King of Adarlan was using his dark powers to get her to show her hands because he wanted to see if she had Brandon wildfire power, and she definitely does. So that night her parents actually assumed it was Maeve, because after all, the King of Adarlan hates magic, so like he's the last person they expected to be using it, and this was an important dinner after all, and Maeve likes to mess with her sister, so they thought it was just kind of Maeve getting revenge. But they decided after that night that they were going to take Aelin to a manor. So it's Aelin, her parents, and Lady Marian. So the uncle, who's the king, is going to stay behind, as well as Aedion. Actually, he's not going to come with them. And the four of them go off to this manor to basically find out if Aelin's okay, and if it was just a one-time thing, and if her magic's going to be under control before they bring her back to the castle. And based on everything we know about the night that Terrasen was attacked, you've probably already caught on that this is actually that night. Later that night before bed, Aelin's mother, Evelyn, does give her something very interesting. It's basically a very large medallion, and her mother says that it will keep her safe, and so she puts it around her neck, and she tells her it is called the Amulet of Orinth, and it's one of the biggest heirlooms in the Terrasen royal bloodline, on top of obviously Aedion's sword. And then her mother says never lose it and never take it off, except for Aelin actually does lose it that very night, because darkness, like the darkness that Aelin is fighting right now in present time, overtook the manor. And Aelin woke up from bed later that night and she just didn't like how dark it was, so she snuck over to her parents' room and hopped in their bed, and it was wet and smelt of copper and iron, and it was not until Lady Marian came in with a light before Aelin realized that she had crawled into bed with her dead parents. The assassin had already come through the manor and killed both of her parents, and somehow, some way that has not been explained, nor will it ever, the assassin did miss Aelin. Lady Marian takes her to another room, and she says that surely someone's going to be coming for them very soon. Then, looking out the window, they can see that whoever the assassin was that killed her parents is on its way back. So Lady Marian looks to Aelin and tells her, "Tell my Alide that I love her very much. And when I say run, you run." The assassin comes in, she commands Aelin to run, and while she's distracting the assassin, Aelin is able to get away. But realistically, all Lady Marian was able to tell her is just cross the bridge over the river and get to the nearby village and hide there, and don't speak to anyone until someone from your family comes to get you. So Aelin is running. She sees a bridge and she goes to cross the bridge. But at this point, the assassin has already taken down Lady Marian and has caught up to Aelin on a horse that is not actually a real horse. It is like a creepy Valg creature version of a horse, and is chasing her down. She does get to the bridge, but it's like one of those rope bridges, and the assassin cuts down the bridge. She falls into the ice river, and that is where Aelin falls into the river and almost dies before Arobin Hamel finds her and takes her to the assassin's keep. So present day Celaena wakes up to see 8-year-old Aelin sitting in front of her. She also sees Sam, which is her first love from Assassin's Blade. She sees her parents, everyone else in her family. She sees Lady Marian, and they're all basically begging her to get up and fight. So she takes young Aelin's hand and she gets up and is ready to fight the Valg. And when I tell you, if there is a scene from this book that I need to see in a film adaptation, it is this one. Chapter 55, Rowan POV. Aelin has fallen into the darkness, and the barrier actually has now fallen with her. Rowan is struggling to accept the fact that she's actually dead because he can feel her. Very interesting, don't you think? Anyways, he's trying to accept the fact that she is dead because Gabriel's right there being like,
dude, she's dead.
And he's like,
I don't think she's actually dead.
And then they see a flicker of light in the darkness. His cadre realize that Rowan is about to risk it all to run into the darkness to save Aelin, so they're all trying to hold him back. But it doesn't work because he pushes past them, and as he's running to Aelin, he slices his palm with a dagger because he knows deep down that he is her Karanom. Remember, Karanom is the person whose magic is compatible with yours, and I'm sure you kind of thought it here and there. So he comes up to her, she's fighting for her life, she's about to be drained of magic, and he says, to whatever end. I love it. Some people think that it's a little overdone in the books, but in my opinion, it makes every single scene that it's set in significantly better. So right as he's about to like charge her up with his magic, she is able to kill 2 of the Valg princes with her fire. We can't give Rowan all the credit for the deaths that are about to happen. Then he is able to power her up with his magic, and she is able to obliterate Narok and the 3rd and final Valg prince. But right as Narok is like dissipating in the flames, he throws a vision at Celaena. And this is a vision of the future. You're not going to find out what it is right now. Give it a couple more minutes. But she destroyed them so thoroughly that after her flames go away and all the darkness is gone, all you can see is 4 of the black collars that were on these creatures' necks, just sitting in the grass. Chapter 56, Sorsha's POV. She's writing a letter to a friend from home, but for some reason she panics when Dorian comes into the room to see her, so she just like crumples up the paper and throws it away. That's kind of a weird thing, but it happens at the beginning of that chapter. Dorian offers to stay with her. She makes the concoctions, and he's basically like her little assistant, and that's kind of the routine that they have. It's really cute. But then after a few hours of working together, Kale shows up to ask Dorian for help. So after the slave massacre, both Dorian and Sorsha are very willing to help Kale with whatever he has in mind. So he says that he has a theory that he wants Dorian to help him test out. Dorian has raw power, which raw power is actually very close to what the word keys have. And considering Dorian and word magic are the only 2 things that can operate inside this triangle of no magic, it seems like there's a lot of overlap at the foundation of their magic sources. Kale sets up 3 crystals surrounding a bowl of water, and he asks Dorian to concentrate on freezing the crystals. Dorian harnesses his power into these crystals, and sure enough, this whole bowl of water freezes. Then Kale smashes one of these crystals and the water in the bowl unfreezes. So now they know, based off of this little theory, I suppose, that although there are 3 towers where this word magic is being harnessed to keep magic out of this triangle, all they need to do is destroy 1 tower for magic to be free again. So they make their plan. They need to knock out 1 tower, and what better tower to break down than the one that's quite literally in the backyard of the castle, in the gardens, disguised as a clock tower. Also, something that that they finally put together is that places like Morath, where Duke Parrington is, and where they sent Caltaine, and where the king keeps suspiciously sending a lot of men, these are right outside of that magic line border. So whatever they're doing over there has to do with magic. Then, in like a really epic moment that I totally love, they're done with their conversation. Kale's about to go off and do whatever, and Dorian just looks at him and says, when I become king, I will be a king who has magic. So you need to not be afraid of my magic. You need to learn to embrace it if this is gonna work out. Good point. Chapter 57, Selena and Rowan POV. So the battle is done. They tried to capture a couple guards, or honestly, even at least one, to ask them questions, but they all carried poison and they poisoned themselves before any of them were able to be kidnapped for questioning. And they all took this poison the second they heard that the Valg were dead. Like, they didn't even try to fight without the Valg. After 2 days worth of sleeping in order to recharge their magic, are finally talking about the consequences of the battle, because now everyone is gonna know that Aelin Ashriver Galathinius is alive. No one except for someone who is the heir of Brannon of the Wildfire is gonna have that kind of magic. So everyone's either going to be coming after her, or they're gonna be expecting something from her, aka taking up her throne. Okay, so do you remember when Aelin dreamt, or like had the vision where she was like reliving the night Terrasen was conquered all over again? Well, when her mother gave her the Amulet of Orinth, and because this was technically a Valg-created memory, it wasn't just what she remembered, he was forcing her to actually relive that moment. So she was looking at it with her today brain, and her today brain noticed that on the Amulet of Orinth, there were word marks. And then it occurs to her, why else would her mother be so adamant about keeping this amulet safe and never parting with it? Because it is one of the word keys, or at least it has a word key inside of it. And now she knows there's only one place it can be, because the last time she was ever wearing it was when she fell into the icy river. Then she woke up the next day in the Assassin's Keep and she wasn't wearing it and she never saw it again, which means the only person who can have this amulet is Arobin Hommel. So now we're just gonna have to go back to Aderlin and get the amulet from Arobin. So she really actually wants to tell Rowan that she just discovered this, but he's still bound by the blood oath to Maeve. And now I can finally explain the blood oath a little bit more. If you've ever seen Ella Enchanted, it's like a very dark twist on that. He has to obey whoever he's given the blood oath to. So in this case, Maeve. If Maeve tells him to kill his best friend, he has to kill his best friend. If Maeve tells him, tell me everything that Aelin told you in secret, he will have to tell her, even if he doesn't want to. If you break the blood oath, it literally like breaks your soul. Like, you can die from breaking the blood oath. Like, it's a very, very serious thing. Tricky thing here, because if you remember, I mentioned much earlier how Aedion was talking about how he was gonna be the first one to give the blood oath to Aelin, and how that was an honor in Terrasen culture. It's because the blood oath is whatever the ruler who's using it makes it to be. A good ruler using the blood oath, it's more symbolic than anything. Someone makes the blood oath to you, they're basically saying, I trust you to be such a good ruler that you're never gonna make me do something that is wrong. And then on top of that, in order to show you that I'm loyal and that I honestly and truly believe that you are a good king or queen, I will be making this blood oath to you and put my life in your hands. That is what the blood oath should be. What Maeve has used it for is she has enslaved the cadre plus some to basically do her dirty work and be her spies against their better judgment. So it's really all about the person who's making you keep the blood oath. The blood oath itself isn't a horrible thing. In Terrasen culture, it was viewed as a really positive and a very symbolic thing, but Maeve is just using it in all the worst ways. She's literally just stripping these people of their free will. So she cannot tell him about what she knows about where the third word key is and what it is. So she just says like, well, I think I know. And then she does tell him everything that she saw when she was in the darkness, and basically tells her the story of the night that Terrasen was conquered, because she's pretty much told him everything about her time as an assassin leading up to Endovir and serving under the king and all of that, but she hasn't really gone before the Assassin's Keep. Then a week is gonna go by and the Demi-Fae have finally all recovered from the Battle of Mistward. Honey, you are snoring so loud. She's like snoring. I don't know if you can hear it. Anyway, so it's a week later. So the Demi-Fae have had time to recover and clean up Mistward from all of its lovely battle gore. And they're celebrating this victory together. And everyone is saying goodbye to Aelin because Rowan is saying like, okay, yeah, you definitely have proven your magic. I mean, for goodness sakes, you just killed Valg princes and one of the king's generals. Clearly, you know how to use your magic and you're ready to get answers from Maeve about the word keys. So she's saying goodbye to everyone. And then Aelin says the most insane thing. And I remember the first time I read this thinking it was amazing, and then every time I reread it, it gives me chills. She tells Emerys and Luca and Micah and all of the Demi-Fae at Mistward, she says, when I take back my throne, not if, when I take back my throne, you and all the Demi-Fae at Mistward will be welcome into Terrasen as citizens, not outcasts. And I love it. I love it. It's so beautiful. Chapter 58, Adian POV. Ren and Murtaugh are leaving to see a long-lost friend who may be interested in hearing about their new opportunity, aka Aelin. But as they're quite literally packing up their things to go visit this person to see if they're gonna side with them if Aelin takes up her throne, they get news that Aelin is alive and in Wendelin, and that she has just killed General Narok and his legion with a fire unlike anything that has been seen since Brandon of the Wildfire. So all of them say, well, ditch those plans. The new goal is that we are going to make sure that we spread this news as fast as humanly possible to the scattered people of Terrasen, to the remaining Eoway people, even to the wine-color-haired Queen of the Wastes, and anyone really on the continent who is so sick and tired of the King of Adarlan. They're gonna tell them Aelin is alive and she is coming for the king. Dorian POV. He has never seen his father with this much rage in his life, and he's like low-key enjoying it. He's like, well, but this is where Dorian says that he welcomes Aelin and he is excited for her. He's happy for her to take up her throne, to defeat his father, because he knows that a world with Aelin as queen is going to be a better world, not only for Sorsha and for Adarlan, but for himself even as a magical being. Chapter 59, this is Aelin and Rowan's POV because they've been traveling for a week to get to Doranel. Guys, I apologize. Literally my entire life I've been saying Dornael, but it's Doranel, so it's like the A and the N are switched. So that's my bad. Anyways, so Aelin is nervous and she's fidgeting with a little ring in her pocket. And this is not actually the ring from Kale, but the one that she found in the cave. Remember when she fought off that little sea creature? So they get to Maeve's throne room and all the cadre are there as well. Clearly they've already informed Maeve of everything that happened at Mistward. And Aelin cut straight to it. She wants to know a couple things. How are the word keys destroyed? Where are they? And what all do you know? Maeve says they cannot be destroyed, but they can be put back in the gate. Not very helpful, but okay. As for what they look like, she says they are black and glittering and they pretty much just look like slivers of stone. And then when Aelin asks about the Valg princes, Maeve says that there's many races of Valg, but they're all ruled by the princes. Aelin asks how they can be killed. And obviously Maeve says, as you learned, like fire and light, but they also can be beheaded, because the princes have like those collars, so they just need to be separated from the collars, basically. And then Maeve makes an interesting comment about, how do you think that Brandon of the Wildfire won all of his glory in the entire kingdom? This is news to Selena. Frankly, this is news to us, because Brandon, we've always known him to be like this royal who helped defeated the Valg. No, Brandon actually was never a part of a royal bloodline. He basically was given the bloodline as a thank you for destroying the Valg the first time, or destroying them. As we find, they've never been destroyed, they've only ever been contained. So apparently he was just some random bastard who was God blessed with this great wildfire power, and that's how he became the guy that we and Aelin know him to be. What's crazy about this is, do you remember the mark that shows up on Aelin's forehead in the very first book when she's fighting Cain? I forgot to mention it earlier, and that's 110% my bad. But the mark shows up on her forehead again when she's fighting the Valg and General Narok. So it has now flared up twice, and it was whenever she was fighting someone under a very strong Valg influence. which is also what we find out is what's happening with Cain. Because of his obsidian ring, it's the same stone that is in the collars. So apparently it's always been called Brannon's mark because Brannon had it, but apparently it's actually called the mark of the bastard. So they call it the mark of the nameless because in their culture, bastard children did not take on their father's last name. They were unwanted children, so they were nameless. Every single one of Brannon's children had this nameless mark on their forehead. Sorry, that's a big info dump, but it is actually really important. So like, remember that information, but also kind of lock it to the back of your brain because we're not going to use it for a hot minute. So with all three of these word keys, the King of Adarlan would not only have an infinite hard to kill army, but apparently once you have all three, you can raise an army of the dead that is quite literally unkillable. So we really need to keep the king from finding and using the third word key. Maeve already assumes the king has two, which Aelin also assumes, but she doesn't know where the third one is. She asks Aelin, but Aelin's like, yeah, I have no clue either. Maeve doesn't believe her because she like flinches or whatever, and so she makes Rowan, using the blood oath, tell her. So under the blood oath, he can't resist, and he literally says, Aelin found a riddle last year in the castle that laid out the whereabouts of the three word keys, and she thinks she knows where the third one is, but she won't tell me. Now, I will say right now, especially if you haven't read the book and you're just listening to this, I will emphasize this is not a betrayal by Rowan. Like, it's very clear that Rowan is trying to fight this and that he's horrified that he even said anything. So this is not a betrayal. This is simply just the blood oath. Maeve is like, okay, Aelin, tell me where you think the third one is, and she refuses to. So she has Gavriel start whipping Rowan and saying that Rowan is going to keep getting whipped by his friend Gavriel, who's also under the blood oath right now and does not want to be hurting his friend. But a couple whips in, Aelin knows that there's no way out of this but with fire. So she unleashes wildfire at Maeve. Chapter 60, still Aelin's POV. Maeve is in fact not burning, unfortunately, and neither is any of the cadre, thank goodness. But everything around them basically is. And this is where that iconic line comes in that you've probably seen all over TikTok, where Aelin says, "One thought from me and your city will burn." And then Maeve is like, "My city's made of stone." And Aelin says, "But your people aren't." Epic moment. Aelin has been playing all of her cards right because she has pieced a bunch of things together. Maeve has already shown her hand. She doesn't know anything else about the word keys. Aelin did kind of get tricked in all of this. Maeve didn't actually know much more than she did, but, you know, don't bargain with a fae. So Aelin reveals that she knows the truth to Maeve. Maeve did not give Brannon and Anthril, Brannon's closest friend who died in their conquest against the Valg. She did not give them the word keys like legend says. She actually tried to keep the keys for herself. In a struggle to keep them for herself, she killed Anthril, who is the fae warrior that she loved according to legend. And while she was grieving her actions, Brannon took the keys from her, left Anthril's ring and sword in the cave where he infamously fought a weird cave creature, the one that Emerys and Luca told us about. Also, this is the sword that Aelin has right now, and the ring that she has right now. And then Brannon went to go defeat the Valg on his own. So as Aelin's telling her all this, she pulls out the sword, and Maeve is like, "I want the sword, and if you give me the sword, I'll let you leave here fine." Aelin says no, it belongs to her now. And anyways, Maeve is the last person that Brannon would want to have Anthril's sword. And then, okay, do you remember how Narak, right before he died, he like threw a vision of the future at Aelin? So she decides to also throw this vision at Maeve and make her watch it. I'm like losing my voice, so hopefully I can read this. The deafening crowd echoed through the pale stone corridors of the royal castle of Orinth. They were chanting her name, almost wailing it. Aelin, a two-beat pause that sounded through each step she made up the darkened stairwell. Goldrun was heavy at her back, its ruby smoldering in the light of the sun trickling from the landing above. She reached the landing and stalked down it, past the towering muscled warriors who lurked in the shadows just beyond the opened archway. Not just warriors, her court. Adian was there, and a few others whose faces were obscured by shadow, but their teeth gleamed faintly as they gave her feral grins. A court to change the world. She kept her eyes ahead, a half smile on her face as she emerged at last onto the balcony, and the cries grew frantic. As overpowering as the frenzied crowd outside the palace, in the streets, thousands gathered and chanted her name. With this power, with the keys that she had attained, what she had created from them, the armies she had made to drive out their enemies, the crops she had grown, the shadows she'd chased away, these things were nothing short of a miracle. She was more than human, more than a queen. She was Aelin, beloved, immortal, and blessed. Aelin, Aelin of the Wildfire, Aelin, Fireheart, Aelin, Lightbringer. She raised her arms, tipping back her head to the sunlight, and their cries made the eternity of the White Palace tremble. On her brow, a mark, the sacred mark of Brandon's line, glowed blue. She smiled at the crowd, at her people, at her world, so ripe for the taking. Honestly, can we just end the book right there? I'm like losing my voice. Oh my word. Maeve did not like that vision. She didn't like that vision at all. So Selena suggests that Maeve watch herself before coming after her, her people, or Rowan. But Maeve quickly reminds Aelin that Rowan actually belongs to her, not Aelin. So Aelin pulls out the ring. Anthral's ring. The one that was in the sheath that the sword came out of. Yeah, apparently it was supposed to be the engagement ring he gave her before he found out who she really was. So Maeve is a little sentimental and she wants the ring of her lover that she killed. Aelin says, okay, fine, I'll give you your engagement ring if you free Rowan from his blood oath. Maeve actually does hesitate because she cannot afford to lose Rowan. Like Rowan's important. Except for maybe Lorcan, I think Rowan is probably one of her strongest. But Aelin says she's actually gonna melt the ring if she doesn't release Rowan like right now. So Maeve does, and Rowan immediately, in an act of defiance against Maeve, the first thing he does as a free man is drop to his knees in front of Aelin, and he makes the blood oath to her. Aelin doesn't want this because she's always seen it as a type of slavery, but then he reminds her that the blood oath is only as bad as the person who's enforcing it, and basically says, like, as my first act of freedom, this is what I want to do. I want to give you the blood oath. And she just says,
okay, if that's what you want.
And so Rowan makes the blood oath to Aelin to serve her in her court. And then they leave Dornael immediately. They find an inn for the night outside of the kingdom where Aelin asks him for a tattoo. She wants her entire story in the Old Fae language. And then honestly, and probably one of the top emotional moments in the whole series for me, she finally sings a song of lament for her family and all of Terrasen for the very first time since the kingdom was conquered. Chapter 61, it is officially the War Games for the Iron Teeth Witches. From what I gathered, what the War Games really contains is the 3 different clans all have an egg, and it's a glass egg, and it's in a nest. And the first clan to retrieve both of the other clan's eggs first and bring them back to their own nest without breaking them wins. There's a rule about killing. They're not allowed to kill each other for this exercise. And honestly, it's a very eventful chapter, but it doesn't necessarily warrant 10 minutes worth of me giving you a play-by-play of what happened, so I will just fast forward to the eventful part. The Blackbeaks are basically about to win. Naturally, they crushed it. I think you could expect that. When Manon hears a scream of pain from Petra, and not physical pain, but emotional pain, they all turn around. Iskra's wyvern had clamped its teeth down on Keely and had seriously hurt Keely. And this is Petra's wyvern. Remember, she's the one who said that she also has an emotional connection with her wyvern like Manon does. And then Iskra's wyvern lets go and Keely starts to plummet to the ground. Keely is unable to fly because her wing was damaged by Iskra's wyvern. So Petra and Keely are plummeting to the ground. Abraxos does not wait for any commands from Manon. He dives. Guys, there are so many theories that Keely and Abraxos were actually mates, and rereading the books, I can actually see a couple points where that's true and that's the case, and that also explains why Petra starts to get really soft towards Manon and even like comes to visit her in Abraxos's pen to talk to her a little bit. I do love that theory. Unfortunately, it doesn't really change anything in the story, but it's a cool idea. So Abraxos dives for Keely. Manon doesn't fight it. If anything, Manon is like, all right, let's do this. Petra in the fall did pass out. So Manon has to unstrap herself from her saddle on Abraxos, mid-air, jump onto Keely's back, unstrap Petra, who's passed out and can't unstrap herself, and then like hurls her onto Abraxos's back. Abraxos pulls out his wings, and so they stay airborne. They are fine, but Keely unfortunately falls to the ground, and she does not survive the fall. Chapter 62. Petra's grandmother is very thankful that Manon saved Petra's life, but at the same time, Petra's soul apparently has been broken by losing her mount. Remember, Petra had a very special relationship with Keely, like Manon does with Abraxos, that none of the other witches really understand. So this is like, it's described as her soul being broken. Like, it's very, very heartbreaking. Then the Black Meek grandmother has Manon whipped in private for showing emotions and weakness. Are you kidding me? I cannot stand this woman. I can't stand you. But because the Blackbeak clan did win the games, Manon is given the role of wing leader. So everyone gathers to like this great hall, which honestly in all of the fan art is kind of depicted as a stadium, and I do kind of like that idea. But they have Manon come in this big like ceremony basically saying like, you are the wing leader, yay. They're bestowing this title upon her, and then as a gift, they're going to let her kill the Croatian witch that they found spying on them in the mountains. So they figured this is symbolic since Manon did get her reputation as a Croatian slayer and has even for her entire life been wearing the cape of the first Croatian witch that she ever killed, the iconic red one that she always has. So they bring out this Croatian and she looks Manon in the eyes and says, we call you the White Demon. So apparently the Croatian witches have like a kill on sight list, and Manon is #1 name on that list. So that's like how much of a reputation she has with these Croatian witches. So the Croatian keeps talking, and this isn't a direct quote, this is kind of a summary of what she said, but she basically says, I know what you did during the games. This is a reminder for you of what they made you to be. Do you want to know a Croatian secret? You have the power to break the curse, but the Iron Teeth are blind to it. The Iron Teeth are pitied by the Croatians. You are a threat because you were made into a monster, but today you showed heart. Very interesting. But then the witch looks at her and says, do it. And she can tell that it was actually a plea and not a show of confidence. So as a sign of mercy, Manon actually made it quick and just slit her throat. So she goes to fly out alone that night to clear her mind after everything, but honestly, she can't shake it. Like, a lot of what the Croatian said is sitting with her, and it will continue to sit with her for a little bit. I can do this. Honestly, if you've read these before, you know what's going to happen next, and honestly, it's one of the most earth-shattering things for me in the entire series. Chapter 63. Aedion and Kale POV, they are drinking on top of Aylin's old apartment, and Aedion agrees that they need to lie low for a little bit now that the news of Aylin has broken out, and people are going to be questioning Aiden's loyalty specifically now that the one person he swore to protect since his childhood is now alive and a threat to the king that he supposedly now serves. And Kale knows that Selena won't be coming back, but Aylin will be coming back, and he's not ready to meet Aylin, so he's actually going to go back to Aniel before she comes back to Outerland. Sorsha POV, Dorian had fallen asleep when they were hanging out, which left Sorsha to sit with her thoughts on everything they discovered today about the towers and what the return of Aylin might mean. We're gonna jump back to Kale's POV because it's later that night and he's throwing together some plans for Sorsha and Dorian to escape so they can decide next steps for destroying the tower. But then he is summoned to see the king in the private council's chamber. And we're gonna jump to Dorian's POV also later that night. He got wind that Kale was summoned and he runs to Sorsha's rooms to say, something's not right, we need to leave right now. He can just feel it. But while he's trying to warn Sorsha, Amethy, the high healer at the castle, arrives and says that they both have been summoned by the king as well. Chapter 64, we're in Aedion's POV because he has been summoned to see the king. Aedion walks into this private council chamber where he sees Kale and Dorian and Sorsha as well. The king reveals that his spies have reported some new information to him. Kale and Aedion, who have been known to hate each other, are now drinking buddies and keep disappearing together suspiciously. And his son is in love with a rebel spy. His guards pull Saoirse down and away from Dorian, and they're positioning her to be beheaded when Dorian says that he will tell his dad everything he wants to know, just whatever he does, do not hurt Saoirse. So the king wants to know why Aedion and Chaol have been secretly meeting, but Aedion actually speaks up first thing and says that Chaol found out that he was a spy and has been blackmailing him to feed him more information about the rebel movement in hopes to throw himself under the bus to rescue Chaol. But then Aedion says, "My queen is coming, so none of it matters anymore." So the king says that he will execute Aedion, and it will be very public, and he's actually going to delay it a month to give Aelin some time to get wind of it in hopes that she comes to rescue him. So he basically just told Aedion that I'm going to torture you for a month, and then you're going to be the bait to bring Aelin to me, which is not what Aedion wanted at all. But then Aedion is dragged out. Then Dorian asks if Saoirse can be released now because clearly the king found out who the spy was and Saoirse's innocent. And then he says, "Such interesting letters you send to your friends." Do you remember that one time Saoirse was writing a letter and then Dorian came in and she was all jumpy and she threw it away? Well, apparently the king got wind that Dorian was kind of romantically involved with her, and he had someone snoop on her, and they went through her trash and they read a letter that was very clearly in code. They basically found out that yes, Saoirse is a rebel spy. And then she turns to Dorian and she says, "I was not supposed to love you." Would you believe I've read this multiple times and I've never not cried? So Dorian begs his father to just banish Saoirse, but within a second the king says no, and then he has Saoirse beheaded right there in front of Dorian. And from Chaol's POV, he says that he watched Dorian break. Chapter 65, Chaol watches Dorian absolutely fall apart over Saoirse's body as Aedion's finished being dragged away, to which this happens. Chaol looked at the king, at a shattered friend, and drew his sword. The king rolled his eyes. "Put away your sword, captain. I have no interest in your noble tactics. You are to go home to your father tomorrow. Do not leave this castle in disgrace." Chaol kept his sword drawn. "I will not go to Aniel," he growled, "and I will not serve you a moment longer. There is one true king in this room. There always has been, and he is not sitting on that throne. There is a queen in the north. She has already beaten you once. She will beat you again and again, because what she represents and what your son represents is what you fear most. Hope. You cannot steal it, no matter how many you rip from their homes and enslave. You cannot break it, no matter how many you murder." The king shrugged. "Perhaps, but maybe I can start with you." He flicked his fingers at the guards and said, "Kill him too." Chaol whirled to the guards behind him and crouched, ready to find a path for himself and Dorian. Then a crossbow snapped, and he realized there had been others in the room, hidden behind impossibly thick shadows. He had only enough time to twist to see the bolt firing for him with deadly accuracy, only enough time to see Dorian's eyes widen, and the whole room plunged into ice. Dorian has now used his magic in front of his father, to which his father responds, "I knew you had it." So the king did all that to expose Saoirse in hopes that Dorian would lash out with his magic, but when he didn't, he then goaded Chaol, knowing that it would make Dorian use his magic, if not for Saoirse, then at least for Chaol. Dorian looks to Chaol and tells him to run, and when he comes back, to burn the castle to the ground. So Chaol tells Dorian that he loves him, and then he runs, realizing that he is leaving behind everything that he knows and loves. Dorian POV, he's looking at Saoirse's body, and all he knows is that Chaol got away, and that's all he cares to know. But then he looks up and he sees his father walking towards him with a black collar. The last thing he remembers is his father putting the black collar around his neck. And we know what happens when that black collar is put on someone's neck. Then we're gonna jump back to Chaol's POV because he escaped through those secret tunnels going out of Celaena's old rooms, and he only made one stop, and that was to get Fleetfoot, Selena's dog. He stops by Mort, which is the skull door knocker that's on the door that leads to Gavin and Elena's tomb, and basically tells him where Kale is going in case he sees Aelin again, and says, tell Aelin where she can find me. And then as he's removing a grate to lower himself into the sewage system and work his way out of the castle, he realizes that he is not aware if Dorian is dead or alive, but he also cannot decide which would be worse. So he makes his way to Aelin's old apartment to tell Ren everything that happened, and then Ren reveals that he's the one that Sorsha was writing to. Guys, I don't think you understand. And I feel like some people think that Kale really just like tries to be the victim and like blame himself for stuff he doesn't need to so that he can say he's the victim. But Kale intentionally left Dorian and Sorsha out of so much and tried to keep them disconnected from everything. Sorsha, because she was disconnected, was writing to the rebels. If he had just been open and honest from the beginning, there would not have needed to be all this secrecy. And Sorsha would not have been needing to write Ren. Chapter 66, Manon has been summoned by her grandmother, who basically tells her that Duke Parrington wants Manon and the 13 in Morath, and they leave tomorrow, and they will be serving the Duke directly from now on as the wing leader and her coven. Chapter 67, Kale goes to the docks somewhere in the villages of Aderlin, and he takes his blade, the blade of the captain of the guard, and throws it into the water, and instead he replaces it with Damaris. Chapter 68, Rowan and Aelin's point of view. Her plan is to go back to Aderlin alone, but as Selena, not Aelin, in order to get the amulet of Orinth from Erebin, to find Kale, and to gather all of the scattered people of Terrasen. The story does continue in Queen of Shadows, but I did promise that I would do Assassin's Blade next. Honestly, I just keep pushing this one off, and I cannot justify pushing this off any further than after Heir of Fire, so we are going to do Assassin's Blade, and then we can finally jump into Queen of Shadows.